You found the Stealth Podcast. Tonight, we'll travel through dark and lonely stories. Where in the world are you watching from? What time is it there? Subscribe and leave your like to support us. Let's begin. My name is Ethan Mercer, and I'm 28 years old. I live in Portland, but I've been on the road for the past 8 months in my converted Sprinter van. What started as a 3-month sabbatical from my tech job turned into something more permanent when the company downsized. With a decent severance package and minimal expenses, I decided to embrace the nomadic lifestyle a little longer. My van isn't anything fancy, just a bed platform, a small kitchenette, and enough storage for the essentials. It's simple, but it's home. I'd spent the last few weeks making my way down the California coast, stopping at state parks and beach towns. My savings were starting to dwindle, so I needed to find some gig work. Los Angeles seemed like the perfect place to park for a while and make some quick cash. I had a buddy from college, Derek, who lived in Echo Park and said I could use his address for job applications. He also mentioned knowing someone who needed help with a construction job. Cash under the table, no questions asked. The night I arrived in LA, I parked in an industrial area near downtown. Most vanlifers know the unwritten rules. Arrive late, leave early, and don't draw attention to yourself. I'd gotten pretty good at finding spots where I could blend in with work vehicles. This particular area had a few abandoned warehouses and some active businesses that closed up at night. No residential buildings meant fewer people to notice me, and I could usually get away with staying a couple of nights before moving on. I met Derek at a coffee shop the next morning. He looked different than I remembered. Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. He was jumpy, constantly checking his phone. "The job's with a guy named Victor," he said, sliding a piece of paper with an address across the table. "Don't ask too many questions. Just show up, do the work, and get paid." Something about his tone made me uneasy, but I needed the money, so I nodded and pocketed the address. That afternoon, I drove to the location, a rundown storage facility on the outskirts of East LA. The place looked sketchy, with chain-link fences topped with barbed wire and security cameras that appeared to be for show rather than function. A tall, muscular man with a neck tattoo of a scorpion waved me in through a side gate. He introduced himself as Victor and showed me to a storage unit filled with crates. "We're moving these to another facility," he explained. $500 for the day's work. I helped load the crates into a panel van, trying not to think about what might be inside them. They were sealed with heavy-duty tape, and some had strange chemical smells coming from them. Victor had 2 other guys helping. A skinny guy named Ricky who couldn't have been more than 20 and an older, heavy-set man who never spoke or made eye contact. The whole operation felt off, but I kept my head down and focused on the task at hand. By sunset, we'd finished loading everything, and Victor handed me 5 crisp $100 bills. "You did good work today," he said, giving me an appraising look. "We could use someone like you regularly." He offered me a job, 3 days a week, same pay. I hesitated, but eventually agreed to come back on Monday. The money was too good to pass up, and my savings account was getting dangerously low. That night, I found a parking spot behind an abandoned grocery store. The lot was empty except for a few discarded shopping carts and piles of trash. I cooked a quick dinner on my portable stove and was settling in with a book when I noticed a black SUV with tinted windows pull into the lot. It circled slowly before parking about 50 yards away, its headlights switching off. My heart rate picked up. Maybe it was nothing, another person looking for a place to crash for the night, but something told me to stay alert. I turned off my interior light and peered through a gap in my window curtains. As the night grew darker, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The SUV remained in the same spot, occasionally idling so the engine wouldn't get cold. I double-checked that my doors were locked and tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. But just as I was drifting off to sleep, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We know what you helped move today. Watch your back." A cold wave of dread washed over me as I realized I might have gotten myself into something far more dangerous than I'd anticipated. I barely slept that night, constantly jerking awake at every sound outside my van. By dawn, the black SUV was gone, but the unease lingered like a bad smell. I decided to call Derek and ask what the hell kind of job he'd sent me to. His phone went straight to voicemail, 3 times. Not a good sign. I drove to his apartment in Echo Park, but when I knocked, A confused woman answered, saying she'd been living there for 6 months and had never heard of any Derek. My stomach dropped. Either Derek had lied about where he lived, or something had happened to him. I sat in my van, parked down the street, trying to piece things together. The text message, the suspicious crates, Derek's nervous behavior. Everything pointed to one conclusion. I'd unwittingly helped transport something illegal. Drugs? Weapons? Either way, I was now implicated in whatever operation Victor was running. I needed to get out of Los Angeles. I could drive north, maybe head to Oregon or Washington, somewhere far from whatever trouble I'd stumbled into. But as I started the engine, another text arrived from the same unknown number. Don't even think about leaving town. We're watching you. I felt sick. How did they know what I was planning? Were they tracking my phone? Following me? Against my better judgment, I decided to go back to the storage facility. Maybe I could talk to Victor, tell him there had been a misunderstanding, that I couldn't work for him anymore. The facility looked different in daylight, more decrepit, more sinister. The gate was padlocked shut, with no sign of activity inside. I called the number Victor had given me, but it had been disconnected. Another dead end. While sitting in my van outside the facility, I noticed a police car slowly cruising by. The officer inside made deliberate eye contact with me before continuing down the street. Was that a warning? Did the cops know about the operation too? I was becoming paranoid, seeing threats everywhere. I needed to clear my head and figure out my next move. I drove to a public library to use their Wi-Fi instead of my phone's data, worried that someone might be monitoring my connection. I searched news reports for any recent busts or criminal activity in East LA. Nothing about the storage facility, but there was an article about a body found in the Los Angeles River 2 days earlier. Unidentified male, mid-30s. The photo was blurry, but my heart raced as I recognized Derek's distinctive sleeve tattoo on the corpse's visible arm. My hands shook as I closed the browser window. Derek was dead, and I was mixed up in whatever had gotten him killed. I needed a plan. First, I had to ditch my phone. If they were tracking me, that would be how. I bought a cheap prepaid phone from a corner store and removed the battery from my old one. Next, I needed a safe place to park for the night, somewhere different from my usual spots in case they knew my habits. I chose a residential street in Culver City, an area with enough overnight parking that my van wouldn't stand out. As darkness fell, I kept the windows covered and lights off, periodically checking outside for any suspicious vehicles. Around midnight, I spotted the same black SUV slowly driving past. They had found me despite my precautions. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slid down below window level and held my breath, praying they wouldn't stop. After the SUV passed, I waited 30 agonizing minutes before starting my engine. I needed to move again, to find somewhere even more hidden. As I pulled away from the curb, I noticed a manila envelope wedged under my windshield wiper. Inside was a photo of me loading crates with Victor, taken without my knowledge, and a note with 2 words that made my blood run cold. Tomorrow, noon. I spent the rest of the night driving randomly around Los Angeles, paranoid that I was being followed. Eventually, I found a 24-hour Walmart parking lot in Torrance where I could blend in with other overnight vehicles. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. The photo was evidence that could link me to whatever illegal activity Victor was involved in. They had leverage, and they were clearly planning to use it. At 11:30 the next morning, I drove back to the storage facility, arriving early to scope out the situation. The place looked abandoned, just like before. I parked across the street, watching for any sign of activity, debating whether I should even show up for this meeting. What choice did I have, though? These people knew who I was, what my van looked like, probably where I was from. Running wouldn't solve anything. They'd already proven they could find me. At precisely noon, the gate to the facility swung open. I took a deep breath and drove inside. Victor stood in front of one of the units, arms crossed, with 2 men I hadn't seen before flanking him. One was tall and wiry with a shaved head. The other was shorter but built like a tank, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. Neither looked like the type who resolved conflicts peacefully. "You've caused us some problems, Ethan," Victor said as I approached. His voice was eerily calm. "The delivery location got raided yesterday. Someone tipped off the cops. The accusation hung in the air between us. He thought I had ratted them out. I didn't tell anyone anything," I protested, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. "I don't even know what was in those crates." Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's the problem with using freelancers," he said to the men beside him. "No loyalty." The shorter man stepped forward, pressing something hard against my ribs, a gun. "We're going for a ride," he growled. No sudden movements. They marched me to a van similar to the one we'd loaded the crates into, shoving me into the back. There were no windows, no way to track where we were going. The drive felt endless. I tried to memorize the turns, the stops, anything that might help me figure out where they were taking me, but it was useless. Eventually, the van stopped, and the back door swung open to reveal an abandoned-looking warehouse. Inside, the space was largely empty except for a few chairs in the center and what looked like industrial plastic sheeting spread on the floor. My stomach clenched. The plastic was there to catch blood and make cleanup easier. "Sit," Victor ordered, pointing to one of the chairs. The man with the scar pushed me down and zip-tied my wrists to the armrests. Victor pulled up another chair directly in front of me, sitting so close our knees almost touched. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to tell us exactly who you talked to about our operation, and then you're going to help us fix the mess you made." I insisted that I hadn't talked to anyone, that I didn't know anything worth telling, but Victor didn't believe me. He nodded to the man with the shaved head, who stepped forward with a toolbox. He opened it slowly, deliberately, revealing an assortment of pliers, knives, and other implements that made my blood run cold. "Everyone talks eventually," Victor said matter-of-factly. "How much it hurts before that happens is entirely up to you." What followed was the most terrifying hour of my life. They didn't hurt me physically, not yet, but the psychological torture of watching them prepare, of seeing the tools laid out neatly, of hearing them discuss the best ways to extract information, was almost worse than actual pain would have been. I was shaking uncontrollably, begging them to believe that I knew nothing, that I was just a guy who needed money and took a job without asking questions. The breaking point came when Victor's phone rang. He stepped away to answer it, speaking too quietly for me to hear. When he returned, his expression had changed. "Seems like you might be telling the truth after all," he said. "We found who tipped off the cops. But now we have a new problem." He leaned in close. "You know too much. And we can't have loose ends walking around Los Angeles, can we?" Victor left the warehouse, instructing the two men to take care of the situation and make it look like an accident. As soon as the door closed behind him, the men began discussing how they would dispose of my body. The plan involved driving my van to a remote spot in the Angeles National Forest, staging a campsite accident, and leaving me there for hikers to find days later. They were so casual about it, like they were discussing weekend plans instead of murder. While they talked, I frantically worked at the zip ties binding my wrists. They'd secured me hastily, and one of the plastic restraints had a small amount of give. I managed to position my hand to apply pressure at the weakest point, the way I'd once seen in a survival video. The whole time, I kept my face neutral, nodding occasionally as if resigned to my fate, trying not to let them see the desperate hope building as I felt the plastic beginning to stretch. The man with the scar left to pull their van around to the loading dock, leaving me alone with the shaved head guy. He turned away briefly to pack up the tools, and in that moment, the zip tie on my right hand snapped free. I didn't hesitate. I lunged forward, grabbing the heaviest tool from the box, a hammer, and swung it with all my strength at his head. There was a sickening thud, and he crumpled to the floor. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely free my other wrist. I had no idea if I'd killed the man or just knocked him out, and I couldn't bring myself to check. I rifled through his pockets, finding a set of keys and a gun. I'd never fired a weapon before, but I took it anyway, tucking it into my waistband. Then I ran for the side door, praying it wasn't alarmed. Outside, I found myself in an industrial area I didn't recognize. It was late afternoon, and the streets were mostly deserted. I spotted my van parked about 100 yards away. They must have brought it here to stage their accident. I sprinted toward it, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to hear shouts or gunshots at any moment. By some miracle, I made it to the van, fumbled the key into the ignition, and peeled out onto the street just as the scarred man came running around the corner of the building. I drove like a maniac, taking random turns, constantly checking my rearview mirror for signs of pursuit. I had no plan beyond putting as much distance as possible between myself and the warehouse. After about 20 minutes of frantic driving, I found myself on the 101 freeway heading north out of the city. My instinct was to keep going, to drive all the way to Canada if necessary, but I knew they had my license plate number. I needed to ditch the van, my home, the one thing I had left. At a rest stop near Thousand Oaks, I pulled over to think. My hands were still shaking, and I was drenched in sweat. I needed help, but who could I trust? The police? What if Victor had connections in the department? That might explain how they knew about the raid in advance. And how would I explain my involvement without incriminating myself? No, going to the authorities wasn't an option. Then I remembered Elena, a woman I'd met at a Vanlife gathering in Big Sur a few months back. She lived somewhere in the valley and had given me her number in case I ever needed a place to crash. This definitely qualified as an emergency. I called her from the prepaid phone, and to my immense relief, she answered and agreed to meet me at a shopping center in Studio City. Elena was understandably shocked when I arrived looking like I'd been through hell, but she didn't ask too many questions. She offered to let me park my van in her gated apartment complex for the night while I figured out my next move. It seemed like a stroke of luck until we were pulling into her complex and I spotted the black SUV parked across the street. They had anticipated my moves, known about my connection to Elena somehow. Had they been tracking me all along, even with my old phone disabled? I didn't stop, just drove past the entrance to Elena's complex and kept going, explaining in a panic what was happening. She directed me to a friend's auto body shop in Panorama City where we could hide the van temporarily. As we drove, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. The SUV was following us. What had been a desperate escape was now turning into a high-speed chase through the San Fernando Valley. The SUV stayed on our tail as I weaved through traffic, blowing through red lights and making illegal turns in a desperate attempt to lose them. Elena clutched the dashboard, alternating between giving directions and crying out in fear whenever we narrowly avoided a collision. The gun dug uncomfortably into my back as I drove, a constant reminder of how far beyond normal life I had strayed in just a few days. We eventually reached the auto body shop, a small, nondescript building surrounded by a chain-link fence. Elena's friend, Carlos, was waiting at the gate and quickly ushered us inside, closing it behind us. "They're right behind us," I gasped as we jumped out of the van. Carlos nodded grimly and directed us into the shop while he dealt with our pursuers. I wanted to protest. This wasn't his fight, but there was no time. From inside the shop's office, we watched through the blinds as the black SUV pulled up outside the fence. Two men got out, the scarred man from the warehouse and another I didn't recognize. They approached the gate where Carlos stood, arms crossed. I couldn't hear what was said, but the body language was clear. Carlos was telling them to leave, and they were becoming increasingly agitated. Everything happened so fast after that. The scarred man reached into his jacket, and Carlos immediately backed away, hands raised. Elena gasped beside me, and I instinctively reached for the gun in my waistband. Before I could think through what I was doing, I was running out of the office, weapon drawn. Later, I would question this decision 1,000 times, wondering if there had been another way, but in that moment, protecting the people who were helping me seemed like the only option. I fired a warning shot into the air, shouting for them to leave. The scarred man spun around, remarkably calm despite the gun pointed at him. "You don't want to do this," he called out. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." He was right, I didn't. But I was beyond caring at that point, running purely on adrenaline and fear. "Just go," I pleaded. "Leave us alone." For a moment, it seemed like they might actually retreat. The scarred man started backing toward the SUV, hands slightly raised. Then everything went sideways. The other man suddenly drew a weapon of his own, and without thinking, I fired again. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space of the auto yard. The man dropped to the ground, blood spreading across his chest. The scarred man took advantage of my shock, charging toward me with surprising speed. We collided hard, both of us falling to the concrete. The gun skittered away as we grappled. He was stronger, more experienced in violence, and quickly gained the upper hand. His hands closed around my throat, cutting off my air. Spots danced in my vision as I desperately clawed at his grip. Just when I thought it was over, there was another gunshot. The pressure on my throat suddenly released as the scarred man slumped forward. Behind him stood Elena, my gun shaking in her hands, her face a mask of horror at what she'd done. Carlos was already on his phone, presumably calling the police. There was no avoiding them now. A man was dead, and another critically injured. The authorities arrived within minutes. Police cars, ambulances, even a helicopter circling overhead. Elena and I were separated, questioned for hours. I told them everything. The job with Victor, Derek's disappearance, the warehouse, the chase. To my surprise, the detective interviewing me nodded along, as if confirming information they already had. "We've been building a case against Victor Menendez for months," he explained. "Human trafficking, drug distribution, murder for hire. Your friend Derek was actually an informant for us." The truth hit me like a physical blow. Derek hadn't set me up. He'd been trying to gather evidence against Victor's operation, and he'd paid for it with his life. The men who'd been following me weren't Victor's men at all, but undercover officers trying to determine if I was part of the criminal organization or another potential witness. The raid on the delivery location had been planned all along, part of a larger operation to bring down Victor's network. In the end, Elena was cleared of any charges, clear self-defense. I wasn't so lucky. Even though I'd helped the police fill in some gaps in their case against Victor, I was still facing potential charges for my role in transporting the crates, which turned out to contain both drugs and illegal weapons. My van, my home, was impounded as evidence. My van life journey had come to an abrupt and tragic end. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom as Victor and his associates were sentenced for their crimes. I had agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence of my own, 2 years probation instead of jail time. As I watched Victor being led away in handcuffs, his eyes met mine with a look of pure hatred that sent chills down my spine. The detective had assured me that Victor wouldn't be able to reach me from prison, but I wasn't convinced. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced I hear the sound of a black SUV idling outside. I've moved to a small town in northern Washington, as far from Los Angeles as I could get while staying on the West Coast. I'm living in an apartment now, with walls and a foundation that doesn't move. But I miss my van. I miss the freedom of the open road. Most of all, I miss the person I was before, someone who saw the best in people, who embraced adventure without fear. That person died in Los Angeles, along with Derek and the man whose blood still sometimes appears in my nightmares. And no matter how far I drive, I don't think I'll ever truly escape what happened there. My name is Lydia Kwan, and I'm 32 years old. I've been living in Chicago for most of my adult life, working as a freelance photographer specializing in urban landscapes and architecture. 3 months ago, I decided to take my work on the road, converting a 2010 Ford Transit into a functional living and working space. The build was modest but efficient, a platform bed with storage underneath, a compact desk that doubled as a kitchen counter, and a portable power station to keep my equipment charged. What I lacked in amenities, I made up for in mobility, able to chase the perfect light in any location without worrying about hotel costs or checkout times. Los Angeles wasn't originally on my itinerary. I'd planned to stick to the Pacific Northwest, capturing the moody coastlines of Oregon and Washington. But when an old college friend reached out about a potential exhibition opportunity at a gallery in Silver Lake, I couldn't resist the detour. Mira had been singing my praises to the gallery owner, a well-connected curator named Julian who specialized in showcasing emerging photographers. This could be my big break, the stepping stone from Instagram popularity to legitimate artistic recognition. I pointed my van south and made the long drive down the coast, arriving in Los Angeles on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon in late July. The city sprawled beneath a blanket of smog, palm trees standing like sentinels against the hazy sky. I'd visited LA before, but always stayed in hotels or with friends. Navigating the city in my home on wheels presented a whole new set of challenges. Street parking had confusing restrictions, and the areas where overnight parking might be tolerated often felt unsafe. After circling through several neighborhoods, I eventually found a quiet industrial block in the Arts District where several other converted vans and RVs were parked. There seemed to be an unspoken agreement among the vehicle dwellers: maintain a low profile, keep the area clean, and look out for each other. My meeting with Julian was scheduled for Thursday morning, giving me a full day to scout locations and capture some fresh material. I wanted to show him more than just my existing portfolio. I needed to prove I could bring a unique perspective to Los Angeles, a city that had been photographed from every conceivable angle. Mira suggested focusing on the contrast between the city's glossy veneer and its gritty underbelly, perhaps capturing the homeless encampments that existed in the shadows of luxury condominiums. That's what Julian responds to, she explained over coffee the morning after my arrival. Art that confronts uncomfortable realities. Following Myra's advice, I spent Wednesday photographing throughout the city, from the tent cities along Skid Row to the gleaming towers of downtown. As the sun began to set, I found myself in an area south of the Arts District, where abandoned warehouses were slowly being reclaimed by developers. One building in particular caught my eye, a former textile factory with beautiful arched windows and faded signage. The golden hour light streamed through the broken panes, creating dramatic shadows across the graffiti-covered interior. I was so engrossed in capturing the perfect shot that I didn't notice the figures watching me from the far corner of the building. "This is private property," a voice called out, startling me so badly I nearly dropped my camera. 3 men emerged from the shadows, moving with the confident swagger of those who considered the space their territory. The one who had spoken appeared to be in his 40s, with a weathered face and calculating eyes that assessed me with unsettling intensity. The other 2 were younger, one rail-thin with nervous energy, the other muscular with a tribal tattoo crawling up his neck. They weren't the typical security guards or construction workers. These men had a predatory air about them that triggered every warning bell in my body. I apologized quickly, explaining that I was a photographer just looking for interesting compositions, already backing toward the exit. The older man smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "No need to rush off," he said, moving to block my path. "We don't get many visitors, especially ones with such expensive equipment." His gaze lingered on my camera, then shifted to the keys visible in my hand. "That your van outside?" "The transit." My stomach dropped. They had been watching me for longer than I realized. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady as I insisted I needed to leave for an appointment. The lie sounded hollow even to my own ears. What happened next exists in my memory as a series of fragmented images, like a roll of film exposed multiple times. The older man, who introduced himself as Ray, becoming unexpectedly cordial, offering to show me something really worth photographing in another part of the building. My instinctive refusal. The atmosphere shifting as Ray's friendly facade cracked, revealing something cold and dangerous beneath. The sudden grip of the tattooed man on my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. My camera being wrenched away despite my protests. Ray examining it, scrolling through my recent photos with growing interest. "You've been busy today," he remarked, his tone conversational yet threatening. "Documenting our city's dirty little secrets." I didn't understand what he meant until he turned the screen toward me, zooming in on a figure barely visible in the background of one of my Skid Row photos. A man who looked remarkably like him, engaged in what appeared to be a drug deal. The recognition must have shown on my face because Ray's expression hardened. "I think we need to have a longer conversation about your photography project," he said, pocketing my memory card, "and about how you're going to make this right." They escorted me back to my van, Ray walking casually beside me as if we were old friends, while the other 2 men followed closely behind. The pressure of their presence made it clear that running wasn't an option. My mind raced through scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. Would they rob me? Take my van? Worse? Ray maintained a stream of conversation, asking about my photography, where I was from, how long I'd been in Los Angeles. Questions that might have seemed like friendly interest if not for the underlying menace in his tone. I answered mechanically, trying to appear cooperative while looking for any opportunity to escape. When we reached my van, Ray insisted on seeing inside. "I've always been curious about these tiny homes on wheels," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Refusing wasn't an option, so I unlocked the door with trembling hands. Ray whistled appreciatively as he climbed in, examining my modest living space with invasive thoroughness. He picked up my laptop, opened drawers, lifted the mattress to peer at the storage underneath, all while making comments about how cozy and clever the setup was. The tattooed man joined him inside, while the skinny one stood guard by the door. I remained frozen near the entrance, acutely aware of how trapped I was in my own home. Here's the situation, Ray finally said, settling into my desk chair as if he owned it. You took some photos today that could cause problems for certain people. People who value their privacy. He held up my memory card between two fingers. I'm keeping this, obviously. But that's not enough, is it? These days, everything uploads automatically to the cloud. His knowledge of technology surprised me, adding another layer to my mounting fear. He was right. Many of my photos had already synchronized to my cloud storage through the van's Wi-Fi hotspot. So here's what's going to happen, he continued. You're going to log into your accounts and delete everything you shot today. All of it. I complied immediately, opening my laptop and accessing my cloud storage under Ray's watchful eye. As I systematically deleted the day's work, hours of photography that might have impressed Julian now vanishing with each click, I fought to keep my composure. These were just photos, I told myself. Not worth risking my safety. But as Ray scrolled through the images before allowing me to delete them, I realized he was memorizing my style, my eye for composition. You're actually pretty good, he remarked. We might be able to help each other out. The casual way he said it sent chills down my spine. Once he was satisfied that all traces of the incriminating photos were gone, Ray leaned back in my chair and made his proposition. He needed someone with legitimate reasons to photograph certain areas of the city, someone who could move freely without arousing suspicion. The implication was clear. He wanted me to conduct surveillance for whatever illegal operation he was running. Just think of it as street photography, he said with a shrug. You do what you normally do, just in the locations we specify. We borrow your memory cards for a few hours, then return them. Simple. When I hesitated, his expression hardened. This isn't really a request, Lydia. You've seen my face. You know what I look like. You're either with us or you're a liability. The threat hung in the air between us. I found myself nodding, agreeing to his terms while my mind screamed in protest. What choice did I have? They knew my name, had been through my belongings, could easily find me again if I tried to run. Ray seemed pleased with my capitulation, his demeanor shifting back to artificial friendliness. Smart choice, he said, standing to leave. We'll be in touch tomorrow with your first assignment. He paused at the door, fixing me with a stare that made my blood run cold. And Lydia, don't even think about going to the police. We have friends there who would be very interested to hear about the photographer who's been trespassing on private property all over the city. They left as suddenly as they had appeared, the tattooed man giving me a wink that made my skin crawl as he exited my van. I locked the doors immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage the deadbolt. For several minutes, I sat on my bed, trying to process what had just happened and what I had agreed to do. The reality of my situation gradually sank in. I was now entangled with people who were clearly involved in criminal activities, people who knew where I lived and had the power to find me wherever I went. The exhibition opportunity with Julian, which had seemed so important just hours ago, now felt trivial compared to the danger I was facing. I barely slept that night, jumping at every sound outside my van, expecting Ray or his associates to return at any moment. By dawn, I had made a decision. I needed to leave Los Angeles immediately. Exhibition opportunity be damned. No career advancement was worth the risk I was facing. I sent Mira a text with a flimsy excuse about a family emergency calling me back to Chicago, then started the van's engine with plans to head north, as far from the city as I could get. But as I pulled away from my parking spot, a black sedan with tinted windows fell into place behind me, maintaining a consistent distance as I navigated through the morning traffic. The message was clear. I was being watched. Running had just become considerably more complicated. My heart pounded against my ribs as I watched the black sedan in my rearview mirror, maintaining a precise distance behind me regardless of my speed or lane changes. I considered heading to a police station, but Ray's warning about his friends in law enforcement kept me driving aimlessly through the Los Angeles streets instead. Eventually, I pulled into the crowded parking lot of a shopping center, hoping to lose my tail in the maze of vehicles and pedestrians. I parked the van, grabbed my phone and wallet, and slipped out, weaving through the morning shoppers while constantly glancing over my shoulder for signs of pursuit. Inside a busy coffee shop, I found a corner table and tried to think rationally about my options. Going to the police seemed too risky without knowing which officers might be in Ray's pocket. Leaving town was clearly being prevented. My exhibition meeting with Julian was in less than 24 hours, and I briefly considered showing up just to maintain appearances, but the thought of spending another night in Los Angeles filled me with dread. As I sat paralyzed by indecision, my phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. First assignment, Broadway and 7th, 1 p.m. Focus on the pawn shop and the people going in/out. Don't disappoint us. Attached was a photo of me sitting in that very coffee shop, taken through the window from across the street. The message couldn't have been clearer. There was no escaping their surveillance. With trembling hands, I gathered my things and returned to my van, scanning the parking lot for the black sedan, but seeing no sign of it. This didn't provide any comfort. They clearly had multiple ways of tracking my movements. I drove to a different part of the city, found parking on a busy commercial street where my van wouldn't stand out, and pulled out my laptop. If I couldn't outrun these people, perhaps I could find leverage against them. I did a series of searches for recent criminal activities in the areas I'd photographed, looking for anything that might connect to Ray or his operation. News reports mentioned increased drug trafficking around Skid Row, with police suspecting a new player had moved into the territory, but there were no specifics that I could use. As the 1 p.m. deadline approached, anxiety twisted my stomach into knots. The rational part of my brain screamed that complying with Ray's demands would only pull me deeper into whatever criminal enterprise he was running, but fear overwhelmed reason. I arrived at Broadway and 7th 15 minutes early, parking within view of the pawn shop, a dingy establishment with barred windows and faded signage promising cash for gold and electronics bought and sold. Setting up my camera with a telephoto lens allowed me to capture detailed images of the storefront and its customers without getting too close. I forced myself to approach the task like any other photography assignment, focusing on composition and lighting to distract from the knot of fear in my chest. For 2 hours, I documented everyone who entered and exited the pawn shop, feeling increasingly uneasy about my role in what was clearly surveillance for criminal purposes. Most customers appeared to be ordinary people in financial distress, pawning valuables for quick cash. Others were more suspicious, nervous-looking individuals who entered empty-handed and left with small packages, transactions completed in a fraction of the time of legitimate pawns. I photographed them all, hating myself with each press of the shutter button. When my phone buzzed again at 3 p.m. with a message instructing me to drive to a gas station 2 blocks away, I felt sick with dread but complied, pulling into the location with a sense of inevitable doom. The tattooed man from the previous day was waiting, leaning against a pickup truck with tinted windows. Without a word, he approached my van and extended his hand for the memory card. I hesitated briefly before surrendering it, wondering what information I was providing them and what consequences might result for the people I had photographed. "You did good," he said, his first words to me since our encounter at the warehouse. "Boss is pleased." He handed me a different memory card in return. "Your payment. Don't look at it until you're somewhere private." Before I could respond, he returned to his truck and drove away, leaving me holding the mysterious card with mounting apprehension. That evening, alone in my van parked in what I hoped was a secure location, I inserted the memory card into my camera with shaking hands. It contained a single video file. I pressed play and immediately felt the blood drain from my face. The footage showed Mira, my friend who had arranged the gallery meeting, entering her apartment building, then switching to interior footage of her moving around her living room, completely unaware she was being recorded. The message was unmistakable. They were watching someone I cared about, someone who could become collateral damage if I didn't cooperate. The video ended with a text overlay. "Tomorrow, same place, 10 a.m. I deleted the file immediately, but the image of Mira, vulnerable and unaware, remained burned into my mind. The stakes had just escalated dramatically. Sleep eluded me entirely that night. I lay awake in my van, parked on a quiet residential street in Silver Lake, not far from Myra's apartment building. I debated warning her somehow, but what would I say? That she was being watched because I had accidentally photographed a drug dealer? That leaving town wasn't an option because I was being monitored? Every scenario I imagined ended with putting her in greater danger. As dawn broke, I made a desperate decision. I would attend my meeting with Julian at the gallery as planned, maintaining the pretense of normalcy while using the public venue to seek help. Surely in a crowded art gallery, surrounded by people, I could find a way to explain my situation to someone who could help without Ray's associates overhearing. It was a thin hope, but it was all I had left as I prepared to face another day under their watchful eyes. The Silver Lake Gallery was housed in a converted industrial space, all exposed brick and polished concrete floors. Under different circumstances, I would have been intimidated by the hip crowd and Julian's reputation in the art world. Now, as I walked through the door clutching my portfolio, minus the deleted Los Angeles photographs, these concerns seemed laughably trivial. I scanned the room nervously, looking for any sign of Ray or his associates among the gallery's staff and early visitors. The exhibition currently on display featured stark black and white photographs of urban decay. Ironic, given what I had witnessed in Los Angeles' neglected corners. Julian turned out to be younger than I expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, with fashionably tousled hair and tortoiseshell glasses. He greeted me warmly, attributing my obvious anxiety to normal pre-interview jitters rather than mortal fear. As we sat in his office reviewing my portfolio, I tried to focus on his comments about composition and narrative, forcing myself to respond appropriately to his questions about my artistic influences. All the while, my mind raced for a way to convey my desperate situation without putting him or myself in immediate danger. When he excused himself briefly to speak with a staff member, I quickly scrawled a note on a small piece of paper. I'm being forced to work for dangerous people. They're watching me. Please call police from landline only, not cell. Ask for Detective Ward. I'd noticed a Ward mentioned in one of the news articles about the drug trafficking investigations, a long shot, but my only hope. When Julian returned, I managed to slip him the note while pretending to show him a particular detail in one of my photographs. His expression remained neutral as he read it, but I noticed his posture stiffen slightly. Without missing a beat in our conversation about printing techniques, he subtly nodded and tucked the paper into his pocket. Why don't we continue this discussion over lunch? He suggested, his voice betraying no hint of the bombshell I had just dropped. There's a cafe around the corner with excellent sandwiches. We can talk more about the exhibition possibilities. I agreed gratefully, hoping that getting away from the gallery might provide an opportunity for him to contact help discreetly. As we exited the gallery, Julian casually pointed out neighborhood landmarks, maintaining the facade of a normal business meeting. We were halfway to the cafe when I spotted the black sedan from the previous day, idling across the street. A cold wave of dread washed over me as I realized they were monitoring my every move, even here. Julian must have sensed my panic because he smoothly guided me down a side street, away from the main thoroughfare. There's actually a better place this way, he said loudly enough to be overheard, then lowered his voice. My brother is a police officer. I texted him your note from the bathroom. He says to get you somewhere safe while they mobilize. My relief was short-lived. As we turned another corner, the tattooed man appeared directly in our path, his expression thunderous. Making new friends, Lydia? He asked, closing the distance between us with alarming speed. Julian stepped forward protectively, but froze when the man pulled back his jacket to reveal a gun tucked into his waistband. Gallery boy needs to walk away now, he growled. This doesn't concern him. Julian hesitated, looking at me with genuine fear and regret in his eyes. Go, I urged him. Please. After another moment's hesitation, he backed away slowly, mouthing, help is coming, before turning and walking quickly in the direction we had come from. The tattooed man grabbed my arm roughly, marching me toward a nearby alley where the black sedan was now waiting, its engine running. Ray is very disappointed, he said, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. He thought you were smarter than this. I considered screaming for help, but the crowded street had suddenly emptied, as if pedestrians could sense the dangerous energy radiating from my captor. As we reached the mouth of the alley, desperation gave me courage. I twisted suddenly, breaking his grip, and shoved him hard against a dumpster. The momentary advantage was all I needed. I turned and ran, not back toward the gallery where they would expect me to go, but deeper into the maze of side streets and alleys that comprised this part of Silver Lake. Behind me, I could hear shouting and the sound of running footsteps. I darted between buildings, vaulted over a low fence, and cut through a restaurant's outdoor seating area, causing startled diners to cry out in alarm. My lungs burned and my legs trembled with exertion, but terror provided the adrenaline needed to keep moving. I had no destination in mind beyond escape. No plan beyond putting distance between myself and my pursuers. After several minutes of frantic running, I ducked into the service entrance of a busy hotel, hoping to lose myself in the crowd of guests and staff. The hotel lobby was a blur of activity. Tourists checking in, business people hurrying to meetings, staff moving efficiently between tasks. I tried to blend in, slowing my pace and controlling my breathing despite the panic still coursing through my veins. Making my way to the women's restroom, I locked myself in a stall and pulled out my phone with shaking hands, ready to call 911 despite Ray's warnings about police connections. Before I could dial, however, the bathroom door swung open, and I heard multiple sets of footsteps enter. "Check every stall," a familiar voice ordered. Ray himself had joined the pursuit. I frantically looked for an escape route, but found myself completely trapped as the stall doors began banging open one by one, moving inexorably toward my hiding place. In that moment of purest terror, when capture seemed inevitable, fate intervened in the form of a hotel-wide fire alarm. The piercing sound filled the bathroom, followed immediately by an automated voice instructing all guests and staff to evacuate immediately. The footsteps hesitated, then retreated as the bathroom quickly emptied. I waited several agonizing seconds before emerging from my stall, then joined the stream of people flowing toward the emergency exits. Outside, amid the confusion of evacuated guests milling about, I spotted 2 police cars pulling up to the hotel entrance, lights flashing. Julian had come through. Help had arrived, although they seemed unaware of the specific threat I was facing. I needed to reach those officers before Ray and his men spotted me in the crowd. Keeping my head down, I began moving purposefully toward the police cars, weaving between clusters of annoyed hotel guests speculating about the alarm. I was perhaps 20 feet from safety when a hand clamped down on my shoulder, spinning me around with bruising force. Ray stood there, his face a mask of cold fury, the tattooed man flanking him like an attacked dog waiting for the command. "You've made things very difficult, Lydia," he said, his voice barely audible over the wailing alarm. "Now we need to leave." Quietly, he pressed something hard against my ribs, a gun, concealed by his jacket. "Scream or run, and I'll use this right here." Lots of confusion already, one more won't matter. The choice was made for me when someone in the crowd bumped into Ray from behind, momentarily disrupting his aim. I seized the opportunity, driving my elbow hard into his solar plexus while simultaneously stamping down on his instep with all my strength. He doubled over, gasping, and I broke away, screaming for help and pointing toward the officers. "He has a gun," I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos of the evacuation. Heads turned, including those of the police, who immediately drew their weapons and began moving in our direction. Ray recovered quickly, looking from me to the approaching officers with calculation in his eyes. Making a split-second decision, he turned and melted into the crowd, disappearing down a side street with the tattooed man close behind. What followed was a blur of police statements, squad cars, and questions that seemed endless. I told them everything about the warehouse, the photos, the forced surveillance of the pawn shop. Detective Ward, who had indeed answered Julian's call, listened with growing interest as I described Ray and his operation. "We've been building a case against Raymond Castillo for months," he explained once my statement was complete. "He's moved his organization from San Diego recently, taking over territory that opened up after we arrested the previous supplier. Your photos might actually help us connect some dots." He assured me they would recover my van and belongings, and in the meantime, arranged for me to stay at a secure location under police protection until they could locate and arrest Ray. For 3 days, I remained in a nondescript hotel room, guarded by officers who rotated shifts outside my door. Detective Ward kept me updated on their progress. They had raided the warehouse, finding evidence of drug manufacturing and distribution, but Ray and his core associates had vanished. They recovered my van from where I'd left it near the gallery, returning it to me along with most of my belongings, though my camera and laptop had been stolen, presumably by Ray's people before the police located the vehicle. The pawn shop I had photographed was indeed part of Ray's operation, a front for money laundering and a distribution point for their product. My forced surveillance had inadvertently provided the police with evidence they had been seeking for months. On the 4th day, Ward arrived with news that simultaneously relieved and terrified me. They had located Ray's hideout, a house in the hills above Glendale, and were planning a raid for early the next morning. "We'll get him," Ward assured me, his confidence unwavering. "His organization is falling apart. Several of his lower-level dealers have already been picked up and are cooperating for reduced sentences." He recommended that I leave Los Angeles as soon as possible, suggesting I head north to San Francisco or beyond while they completed their operation. "Once we have Castillo in custody, you should be safe to return for the court proceedings if necessary," he explained. "But until then, distance is your best protection." I didn't need to be told twice. Within hours, I had packed up my few remaining possessions and pointed my van north on the 101 freeway, eager to put as many miles as possible between myself and the nightmare of the past week. As the Los Angeles skyline receded in my rearview mirror, replaced by the rolling hills of Ventura County, I allowed myself to believe that the ordeal might truly be ending. Ward had promised to call me when the raid was complete and Ray was in custody. Until then, I would keep driving, stopping only when necessary, a self-imposed exile from the city that had so recently represented opportunity and advancement in my photography career. That night, I pulled into a rest stop near San Luis Obispo, too exhausted to continue safely. The area was well lit and populated with other travelers making overnight stops, truckers, RV enthusiasts, fellow van dwellers. For the first time in days, I felt something approaching safety as I prepared a simple dinner on my portable stove, then converted the seating area to my bed. I checked my phone repeatedly for news from Detective Ward, but the screen remained stubbornly notification-free. Eventually, physical and emotional exhaustion won out over anxiety, and I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The sound that woke me was subtle, so faint that at first, I thought I was dreaming. A soft metallic scraping, like someone working at the lock of my van's side door. My eyes flew open in the darkness, heart immediately pounding against my ribs as I realized what was happening. Someone was trying to get in. I reached silently for my phone, intending to call 911, only to find the screen wouldn't illuminate. The battery was completely drained, though I distinctly remembered it being at nearly full charge when I'd fallen asleep. As the lock mechanism clicked and the door began to slide open, I lunged across the small space, slamming my full weight against it. There was a grunt of surprise from outside, followed by renewed pressure as whoever was there pushed back. In the struggle over the door, it opened just enough for me to see a face illuminated by the rest stop security lights. Not Ray, as I had feared, but the skinny man who had been with him at the warehouse. "Unlock your door, photographer girl," he hissed through the gap. "Ray just wants to talk. Make things right." I knew with bone-deep certainty that if I let him in, I would never leave this rest stop alive. With a surge of desperate strength, I forced the door closed and managed to engage the lock, then scrambled to the driver's seat as the man began pounding on the windows. The keys were already in the ignition, a Vanlife habit that now seemed providential, and the engine roared to life on the first try. As I pulled away, tires squealing on the asphalt, I caught a glimpse of the skinny man running toward a vehicle parked nearby, and beyond him, a familiar black sedan with Ray himself visible behind the wheel. The next hour was the most terrifying drive of my life, a high-speed chase along the coastal highway. My transit van pushed to speeds it was never designed to maintain, with the black sedan never more than a few car lengths behind. I weaved through the light traffic, blasting through red lights at deserted intersections, trying desperately to reach areas where people or police might be found. The sedan stayed with me, sometimes pulling alongside as Ray or the skinny man gestured for me to pull over, their expressions promising retribution for my continued defiance. My only advantage was my intimate knowledge of the van, its handling, its limits, the peculiarities of its brakes and acceleration that only a regular driver would understand. Dawn was breaking as I approached Morro Bay, the distinctive volcanic plug looming ahead in the growing light. The coastal highway narrowed here, with steep cliffs dropping to the churning Pacific on one side and rugged hillsides on the other. My van was beginning to show signs of strain from the prolonged high-speed chase, the temperature gauge climbing into the red, warning lights illuminating the dashboard. Behind me, the sedan showed no signs of giving up, despite the increasingly technical driving required on the winding coastal road. As we rounded a particularly sharp curve, the sedan attempted to pass me on the cliff side, clearly intending to force me off the road entirely. What happened next occurred in fractions of seconds, yet plays in my memory with agonizing slowness. The sedan miscalculated the curve, its tires losing traction on the early morning dew covering the asphalt. I watched in my side mirror as the vehicle fishtailed violently, Ray fighting to regain control as the car slid sideways across both lanes. There was a moment when time seemed to stop, the sedan perpendicular to the road, Ray's eyes meeting mine through the windows, wide with the sudden realization of what was about to happen. Then gravity took over, pulling the vehicle toward the unguarded edge of the cliff. The sound of breaking glass and crumpling metal was followed by silence as the sedan disappeared from view, leaving only empty air where it had been moments before. I slammed on my brakes, the van skidding to a stop several hundred feet beyond the point where the sedan had gone over. For long moments, I sat frozen behind the wheel, unable to process what I had just witnessed. Then training and humanity overtook shock. I needed to check for survivors, to call for help. My phone was still dead, but surely someone would come along the highway soon. I approached the cliff edge cautiously, peering over to see the sedan resting on a rocky outcropping about 40 feet below, its frame crumpled like a discarded soda can. There was no movement from within the wreckage, no signs of life. As I stood there, trying to decide whether I could safely climb down to check for survivors, I heard the blessed sound of approaching sirens. Someone had reported the accident. Help was coming. The official investigation ruled it an accident, a case of reckless driving in dangerous conditions. I gave my statement to the local police, explaining that the sedan had been trying to pass me unsafely, omitting the reasons for the chase and my connection to the men inside. Detective Ward called later that day, alarmed to hear about the accident and my close encounter with Ray. The raid on the Glendale house had gone smoothly, but Ray hadn't been there. Now they knew why. Ward confirmed what I had already guessed. Ray and the skinny man, identified as Peter Renner, had died in the crash. The tattooed man, Jason Morales, had been arrested during the raid, along with several other members of Ray's organization. With their leader gone and their operation exposed, the threat they posed had effectively ended. In the months that followed, I gave testimony in the case against the surviving members of Ray's drug trafficking ring, revisiting Los Angeles only when absolutely necessary for court appearances. Julian honored his exhibition offer, displaying a carefully curated selection of my work that notably excluded any images of Los Angeles itself. The show was well received, leading to opportunities with galleries in other cities, allowing me to build my career far from the place where I had come so close to losing everything. I still live in my van, still travel the country capturing images of urban landscapes and architecture, but something fundamental has changed in how I see the world through my viewfinder. Every abandoned building holds potential threats. Every shadowy corner conceals possible danger. I'm more cautious now about where I park, more vigilant about security, more aware of the fine line between artistic trespassing and genuine peril. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn when sleep eludes me, I find myself thinking about Ray's face in that final moment before the sedan went over the cliff. There was no evil there, no monstrous quality that would mark him as different from any other man, just human fear in the face of imminent death. I've never been a particularly religious person, but I find myself praying for him sometimes, and for Peter, and even for Jason, who will spend decades in prison for his crimes. I pray for Mira too, who never knew how close she came to being collateral damage in a story she had no part in. Most of all, I pray for myself, for the photographer I was before Los Angeles, for the innocent eye that could see beauty in abandoned places without also seeing danger lurking in their shadows. That innocence, like the men in the black sedan, is gone forever, another casualty of those terrible days when my art became a weapon and my home on wheels transformed from a symbol of freedom to a trap I couldn't escape. I'm Elias Warwick, 29 years old, from Boise, Idaho. My van, a beat-up Ford Transit I named Rusty, is my home, my escape from the grind. I've been chasing freedom on the road for 2 years, parking in quiet spots, waking to new horizons. Last week, I rolled into Los Angeles, the city of dreams and nightmares. looking for a fresh start. The plan was simple: park near Venice Beach, soak in the vibe, maybe find some odd jobs. I found a spot on a side street, tucked between a taco truck and a graffiti-covered warehouse. The ocean breeze carried salt and promise, but something about the place felt off, like eyes were watching from the shadows. I shook it off, figuring it was just the city's pulse, chaotic, alive, a little unsettling. Rusty's interior is my sanctuary: a tiny bed, a propane stove, and a string of fairy lights for charm. I spent the first night sipping cheap coffee, scrolling through job listings on my phone. The street was quiet, save for the occasional skateboarder rolling by. I liked it, felt like I could blend in, disappear into the city's rhythm. But as I lay in bed, the distant hum of traffic felt heavier, like it was masking something. I told myself it was just nerves. Big cities do that, right? They make you jumpy. I locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and tried to sleep. My gut, though, wouldn't settle. It was like the air was too thick, charged with something I couldn't name yet. The next morning, I wandered Venice's boardwalk, dodging street performers and sunburned tourists. A guy named Matteo, wiry with a faded Lakers cap, sold me a used surfboard for $20. He seemed friendly, but his eyes darted too much, like he was scanning for trouble. "You staying long?" he asked, voice low. I shrugged, said I was just passing through. He nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I brushed it off. City folks are weird sometimes. Back at Rusty, I stashed the board and cooked some ramen, the smell filling the van. The day felt normal, but that nagging feeling stuck with me, like I'd missed a warning sign. By dusk, I was back in my parking spot, the warehouse looming larger as the sun dipped. I noticed a group of guys across the street, maybe 4 or 5, leaning against a chain-link fence. They weren't doing much, just smoking and laughing, but their stares felt heavy, like they were sizing me up. I told myself it was nothing. People hang out, right? But the way one of them, a tall guy with a shaved head, kept glancing at Rusty made my skin crawl. It wasn't just curiosity. It was something darker, more deliberate. I locked the doors again, my hands a little shaky, and turned off the fairy lights to stay low-key. I tried to focus on my phone, scrolling through X for local tips, but my eyes kept drifting to the window. The group was still there, their voices carrying in sharp bursts. One of them tossed a bottle, and it shattered near my van, the sound jarring in the quiet night. My heart kicked up a notch. Okay, maybe they're just drunk, I thought, but the vibe was off, like the start of something horror movie bad. I peeked through the curtain, and the tall guy was staring right at my van, his face blank but intense. It was disturbing, like he knew I was watching. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak of the van, every distant shout, had me on edge. I kept thinking about Boise, where the worst thing was a neighbor's dog barking too loud. LA was different, grittier, unpredictable. I told myself I was overreacting, but my gut said otherwise. I started wondering if parking here was a mistake. The spot was free, sure, but it felt exposed, like I'd painted a target on Rusty. I thought about moving, but it was late, and I didn't know the city well enough to find somewhere safer. Plus, gas wasn't cheap. The next day, I met a woman named Lila at a coffee shop on Abbot Kinney. She was in her 40s, with a warm smile and a van of her own. A sleek Sprinter parked a few blocks away. We bonded over Vanlife hacks, like how to keep your cooler from smelling like death. She warned me about parking in sketchy spots. LA's got its charm, but it's got teeth too, she said, sipping her latte. Her words stuck with me, especially when I got back to Rusty and saw a fresh scratch on the side, long and jagged, like someone had dragged a key across it. My stomach dropped. This wasn't random. I started noticing little things after that. A cigarette, but near my tire, still warm. A crumpled flyer for some club shoved under my wiper, but it felt like a message, not an ad. The group across the street was there again, and the tall guy was back, his eyes locked on my van like he was memorizing it. I told myself to chill, but the air felt thick with tension, like something scary was brewing just out of sight. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I say? Some guys are looking at me funny? Yeah, that'd go over well. By the third night, I was wired, barely sleeping. I kept my pocket knife close, a habit from my Boise days when I'd camp in the woods. The city felt like a different kind of wilderness, one where the predators wore sneakers and smoked Marlboros. I didn't know what these guys wanted, but their presence was suffocating, like a noose tightening with every glance. I kept the curtains drawn, my phone charged, and Rusty's keys in my hand, just in case. Something was coming. I could feel it, like a storm about to break. Morning light barely cut through the fog as I crawled out of bed, my eyes gritty from another sleepless night. That scratch on Rusty's side was still there, mocking me. I ran my fingers over it, the jagged edge cold and sharp. It wasn't an accident. Someone meant to mark me. I tried to shake the thought, but it clung like damp air. I needed to move, find a new spot, but LA's streets were a maze, and safe parking felt like a myth. I grabbed my coffee mug, hands shaky, and boiled water on my stove. The routine grounded me, but the street outside felt alive with eyes I couldn't see. It was disturbing, like I was a mouse in a snake's cage. I decided to scope out the neighborhood, maybe figure out if those guys were locals or just passing through. Walking down the street, I passed the warehouse, its graffiti staring back like a warning. A guy in a hoodie, maybe mid-20s, was spray painting a new tag. I nodded at him, trying to seem chill, but he just stared, his spray can hissing. "Nice van," he said, voice flat. My stomach twisted. Was he one of them? I mumbled thanks and kept walking, but my heart was hammering. Back in Boise, strangers were just strangers. Here, every glance felt like a threat. Lila texted me, asking if I wanted to grab lunch. I met her at a food truck off Rose Avenue, the smell of grilled onions cutting through the salty air. She noticed my jumpiness right away. "You okay, Elias?" she asked, eyebrows raised. I told her about the scratch, the guys, the cigarette butts. She frowned, stirring her soda. "Sounds like you're on someone's radar. Move your van tonight." Her words hit hard. I'd been stubborn, thinking I could tough it out, but maybe that was my first mistake. I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Where could I even go? Back at Rusty, I started searching for new parking spots on my phone. Most were either too expensive or too exposed. I found a lot near Culver City, but it was a 30-minute drive, and my gas tank was flirting with empty. I cursed myself for not budgeting better. While I was scrolling, a loud bang on the van's side made me jump, my phone clattering to the floor. Heart pounding, I peeked out the window. Nothing. Just an empty street, the warehouse looming like a silent threat. But that bang wasn't random. It was too deliberate, too close. I called Mateo, the surfboard guy, hoping he knew a safer spot. His voice was cagey, like he was distracted. "Yeah, man, try the lot by the pier. It's chill." Something about his tone felt off, like he was rushing me off the phone. I thanked him anyway, but my gut screamed not to trust him. Had he been watching me too? I shook my head, telling myself I was paranoid. But paranoia doesn't leave scratches on your van. I started packing up, tossing clothes and dishes into bins, ready to move before nightfall. The sooner I left, the better. As I cleaned, I found another flyer under my wiper, this one handwritten, "Leave." Just one word, scrawled in black ink. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a prank. It was a warning, straight out of some horror flick. I stuffed it in my pocket, hands trembling, and checked the street again. The group was back, same spot by the fence, the tall guy with the shaved head staring right at me. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. It was scary, like he was daring me to make a move. I thought about confronting them, but what was I going to do? Wave my pocket knife and hope they scatter? Yeah, right. Instead, I climbed into Rusty's driver's seat, keys in hand, ready to bolt. But the engine sputtered, refusing to turn over. My heart sank. I'd been meaning to fix the battery, but I'd put it off, another dumb mistake. I slammed the steering wheel, cursing under my breath. The street was quiet now, but that only made it worse, like the calm before something awful. I popped the hood, pretending I knew what I was doing. As I fiddled with the battery cables, I heard footsteps crunching on gravel behind me. I froze, my pulse roaring in my ears. I turned slowly, expecting the tall guy, but no one was there. Just the empty lot, the warehouse, and that damn fence. My mind raced. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe I was losing it. But deep down, I knew better. Something was closing in, and I was stuck here, exposed, with a van that wouldn't start. By dusk, I was still stranded, my phone battery at 10%. I texted Lila, asking if she could help jump the van. She didn't reply. I tried Mateo again, straight to voicemail. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows that felt alive, like they were creeping closer. The group was gone now, but that didn't ease the knot in my chest. If anything, it made it worse. They weren't lurking anymore. They were planning something. I locked myself in Rusty, knife in hand. and waited, every nerve screaming that something scary was about to go down. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I sat in Rusty's driver's seat, clutching my knife like it could save me. The street was dead quiet, but that silence was worse than any noise. It felt like the world was holding its breath. I kept glancing at the windows, expecting that tall guy's face to appear, his blank stare boring into me. My phone was useless now, battery dead, and Lila hadn't texted back. I was alone, trapped in a broken van on a sketchy LA street. The air felt thick, like the horror of whatever was coming was already pressing down on me. I tried to breathe slow, but my chest was tight, every shadow outside looking like a threat ready to pounce. I decided to check the battery again, hoping I'd missed something simple. I grabbed my flashlight, its beam shaky in my hand, and popped the hood. The streetlights barely reached this corner, and the darkness felt alive, swallowing the edges of my vision. As I leaned over the engine, a low chuckle echoed from the alley beside the warehouse. My blood froze. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was cold, deliberate, like someone was toying with me. I swung the flashlight around, catching nothing but graffiti and trash. But that laugh was real, and it was close. Back inside Rusty, I locked the doors again, my hands fumbling. The flyer with leaves scrawled on it was still in my pocket, crinkling every time I moved. I pulled it out, staring at the jagged handwriting. It wasn't just a warning anymore. It felt like a promise. My mind raced back to a news story I'd read in Boise about a guy who got jumped in a parking lot, left for dead over a wallet. Was that what this was? Some gang marking their turf? The thought was disturbing, but it made too much sense. I was an outsider, easy prey in their eyes. I tried the engine again, praying for a miracle. Nothing. Just a weak click that mocked my desperation. I cursed, slamming my fist on the dash. That's when I saw it. A figure moving across the street, quick and low, like they didn't want to be seen. My heart jackhammered. It was the tall guy, his shaved head catching the streetlight's glow. He wasn't alone. Two others flanked him, their faces hidden in hoodies. They weren't just hanging out now. They were circling, closing in on Rusty like wolves. I ducked low, my breath shallow, hoping they hadn't seen me. But the tall guy stopped, his head tilting like he was listening. He raised a hand, and the others froze, their silhouettes sharp against the fence. My mouth went dry. This wasn't random anymore. This was a hunt, and I was the target. I gripped my knife tighter, its blade dull and useless against three guys. I thought about running, but where? The street was a trap, and Rusty was my only shelter, even if it was a broken one. A sharp tap on the back door made me jump, my knife slipping to the floor. I scrambled to grab it, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold it. Another tap, harder this time, like someone was testing the lock. I stayed low, heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. Then, a voice, low, rough, almost amused. "Yo, Van guy, you still in there?" It was the tall guy, his tone dripping with menace. I didn't answer, didn't move. The silence stretched, heavy and scary, until I heard metal scrape against Rusty's side, slow and deliberate. I peeked through the curtain, just a sliver. The tall guy was right there, his face inches from the window, eyes locked on mine. My stomach lurched. He smirked, like he'd won something, and tapped the glass with a crowbar. The other two were behind him, one holding a flashlight, the other a bat. This was no prank. This was horror unfolding in real time. I thought about Lila's warning, how LA had teeth. She wasn't kidding. These guys weren't just trouble, they were danger, and I'd parked right in their den. The tall guy stepped back, motioning to the others. They spread out, one heading to the front of the van, the other to the side. My mind screamed to do something, anything, but I was frozen, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The crowbar scraped again, louder, like they were prying at the door. I grabbed my backpack, shoving in my wallet and keys, my hands clumsy with panic. If they got in, I was done. I needed a plan, but my brain was a mess, every thought drowned out by the thud of my pulse. Then, a loud bang shook the van, like someone had slammed the bat against the side. I yelped, unable to hold it in. The tall guy laughed again, that same cold chuckle, and called out, "Come on, man. Make this easy." His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made my skin crawl. Something was clearly wrong, worse than I'd imagined. These weren't just thugs. They were organized, enjoying the chase. I was in deep, and the terror was only beginning. The van shook again as another blow landed, the bat's thud echoing like a death knell. My heart was a jackhammer, my hands slick with sweat as I clutched my backpack. The tall guy's voice cut through the night, taunting, "You can't hide forever, Van Guy." I had seconds, maybe less, before they pried Rusty open. I scrambled to the driver's seat, praying the engine would catch this time. My hands shook as I turned the key, nothing but that weak click. Panic clawed at me. I was trapped, cornered in a horror show with no script. I grabbed my knife, useless as it was, and scanned for an escape. The back door rattled. They were trying to break in. I dove to the floor, crawling toward the side door, my only shot. The crowbar scraped again, metal screaming against metal. My mind raced, picturing news headlines about a Boise guy found dead in LA. No way, I wasn't going out like that. I yanked the curtain aside, checking the street. The tall guy was at the back, his buddy with the bat at the front, but the third guy was out of sight. That was my chance. I unlocked the side door, hard in my throat, and shoved it open, tumbling onto the pavement. The cool air hit me like a slap, but I was moving, running blind into the alley. My sneakers slapped the ground, each step a desperate prayer. The alley was narrow, littered with trash and broken glass, the warehouse looming on one side. Behind me, shouts erupted. The tall guy had seen me. "He's out," he yelled, his voice sharp with excitement. My legs burned as I sprinted, dodging a dumpster, my backpack bouncing against my spine. I didn't dare look back, but their footsteps pounded closer, heavy and relentless. This was life or death, a scary chase through LA's underbelly, and I was losing ground fast. I turned a corner, hoping to lose them in the maze of streets. Venice's alleys were a labyrinth, all shadows and dead ends. I ducked behind a stack of crates, my breath ragged, trying to stay quiet. The tall guy's voice echoed, closer now. "Where you at, man?" His tone was mocking, like this was a game to him. I crouched lower, my knife trembling in my hand. I thought of Lila, wishing I'd listened when she told me to move. My stubbornness had landed me here, running from predators in a city that didn't care. A flashlight beam swept the alley, grazing the crates. I held my breath, every muscle locked. The third guy, the one I hadn't seen, was close. I could hear his boots crunching gravel. My mind screamed to move, but where? If I ran, they'd hear me. If I stayed, they'd find me. The beam passed again, and I caught a glimpse of the guy with the bat, his silhouette hulking in the dark. This wasn't just a robbery. It was something darker, more disturbing, like they wanted to hurt me just because they could. I spotted a gap between buildings, barely wide enough for me. I bolted, squeezing through, my jacket snagging on brick. The space opened into a vacant lot, overgrown with weeds and ringed by a sagging fence. I tripped over a pipe, sprawling face first into the dirt, my knife skittering away. Pain shot through my knee, but I scrambled up, hearing the tall guys laugh behind me. They were closing in, their steps deliberate now, like they knew I was cornered. I stumbled toward the fence, praying I could climb it before they reached me. The fence was rusted, sharp edges biting my palms as I hauled myself up. I heard the bat guy shout, "He's there," and something whizzed past my head. A rock, maybe, smashing into the fence. My arms shook, but I kept climbing, desperation fueling me. I dropped to the other side, landing hard in a parking lot. Headlights flashed in the distance. Hope, maybe. I sprinted toward them, my lungs burning, the shouts behind me growing fainter. But I wasn't safe yet. The tall guy's voice carried, cold and clear, "We'll find you." I reached the edge of the lot, ducking behind a parked car. My chest heaved, every breath a knife in my ribs. The headlights belonged to a delivery truck, idling nearby. I could beg the driver for help, but what if he was with them? Paranoia was eating me alive, but I couldn't trust anyone. I crouched low, scanning for a way out. The street beyond was busy, cars, lights, people. If I could blend in, I might survive this horror. But my backpack felt heavy, my knee throbbed, and I knew they weren't done hunting me. I crept toward the street, sticking to the shadows. The tall guy and his crew were still out there. I could hear their voices, fainter but searching. Every step felt like a gamble, every shadow a threat. I was out of Rusty, but not out of danger. This wasn't just a bad night. It was a nightmare, and I was still running for my life. The street was alive with LA's chaos, horns blaring, neon signs buzzing. I blended into the crowd, my hoodie pulled low, trying to look like just another guy. My knee screamed with every step, and my backpack felt like a brick, but I kept moving. The tall guy and his crew were still out there, and I wasn't naive enough to think they'd given up. My phone was dead, Rusty was a lost cause, and I had no plan. All I had was the crowd and a fading hope I could disappear into it. But the horror of the chase clung to me, a weight I couldn't shake, like their eyes were still on my back. I ducked into a 24-hour diner on Washington Boulevard, the kind with sticky floors and tired waitresses. I slid into a booth, my hands shaking as I ordered coffee I couldn't afford. The waitress, a woman named Carla with a smoker's rasp, gave me a pitying look. "Rough night, kid?" she asked. I nodded, too wired to talk. I kept glancing at the door, expecting the tall guy to walk in, crowbar in hand. Every clink of a spoon felt like a signal, every shadow a threat. This was paranoia, sure, but it wasn't baseless. I needed a plan, but my brain was mush. I thought about Lila. Maybe she could help. I borrowed Carla's phone to text her, my fingers clumsy on the unfamiliar screen. No reply. I tried Mateo too, but his number was disconnected. My gut twisted. Had he set me up? The thought was disturbing, like I'd been played from the start. I sipped the coffee, its bitterness grounding me, but my eyes kept darting to the window. The street looked normal, but I knew better. Those guys were hunters, and I was still prey. I decided to head for the police station, even if it meant explaining why I was living in a van. I asked Carla for directions. She pointed me toward a precinct a few miles away. I thanked her, left my last $5 as a tip, and stepped back into the night. The air was cooler now, but it did nothing to calm the fear gnawing at me. I stuck to busy streets, weaving through drunk college kids and street vendors. Every face felt like a threat, every laugh a taunt. I was jumping at shadows, but after tonight, could you blame me? Halfway to the precinct, I made my fatal mistake. I cut through a quiet street to save time, thinking the crowd had my back. The street was dim, lined with closed shops and parked cars. I moved fast, my knee throbbing, but then I heard it, footsteps, heavy and deliberate, matching my pace. My heart sank. I turned, and there he was, the tall guy, alone this time, his crowbar glinting under a streetlight. He didn't run, didn't shout, just walked, steady and sure, like he knew he had me. I broke into a sprint, pain be damned, but the street was a dead end. A brick wall loomed ahead, no alleys, no escape. My breath hitched as I spun around. The tall guy was closer now, his smirk cold and final. "Told you we'd find you," he said, tapping the crowbar against his palm. I backed up, my hands scrabbling at the wall, looking for anything. A pipe, a brick, a miracle. Nothing. My knife was gone, lost in the lot, and my backpack was useless. The horror of it hit me. I'd run out of moves. He stepped closer, his eyes empty, like hurting me was just another Tuesday. I thought of Boise, my mom's cooking, the quiet nights I'd taken for granted. I'd come to LA for freedom, but all I'd found was this, a scary, brutal end. I opened my mouth to beg, to reason, but no words came. The crowbar rose, catching the light, and I knew this was it. My biggest mistake wasn't parking in that spot or ignoring Lila's warning. It was thinking I could outrun the kind of evil that thrives in a city's shadows. The blow came fast, a blur of metal and pain. I hit the ground, the world spinning red and black. His boots crunched closer, and I heard that chuckle again, low and cruel. I wanted to fight, to scream, but my body wouldn't move. The last thing I saw was his silhouette against the streetlight, the crowbar raised again. LA's teeth had found me, and they were merciless. There was no escape, no last-second hero. Just me, the pavement, and a tragedy I'd walked right into. The city didn't care, and neither did he. I'm Nora Kovalenko, 32 years old, from Eugene, Oregon. My van, a patched-up Chevy Express I call Blue, is my ticket to freedom, my way of ditching the 9-to-5 grind. I've been on the road for a year, chasing sunsets and quiet nights. Last month, I pulled into Los Angeles, drawn by its buzz and endless possibilities. I parked in a gritty corner of Echo Park, near a mural-splashed alley and a shuttered auto shop. The spot felt hidden, perfect for staying under the radar. But something about the place prickled my skin, like the city was watching me with 1,000 unseen eyes. I told myself it was just nerves, LA's got that kind of energy, right? Blue's my home. A mattress with mismatched sheets, a cooler rigged with ice packs, and a shelf of thrift store books. That first night, I cooked rice on my camp stove, the hiss of the burner calming me. The street was quiet, just the hum of distant traffic and a stray cat slinking by. I liked it, felt like I could breathe, even if the air smelled like asphalt and tacos. But as I ate, a flicker of movement caught my eye through the window. Just a shadow, gone fast, but it left my heart thumping. I locked the doors, checked them twice, and tried to laugh it off. Cities play tricks on you. The next day, I explored Echo Park Lake, dodging joggers and street vendors. A guy named Javier, maybe 40, with a faded denim jacket, sold me a cheap phone charger from his cart. He was chatty, asking where I was parked, but his smile felt too sharp, like he was fishing for something. I kept it vague, said I was just passing through. His eyes lingered on me a little too long, and I walked away uneasy. Back at Blue, I noticed a new dent on the rear bumper, small but deliberate, like someone had tapped it with a hammer. My stomach knotted. Was it random, or was someone marking me? I met a woman named Tasha at a coffee shop on Sunset Boulevard. She was a Vanlifer too, mid-20s, with a rig parked near Griffith Park. We swapped stories about bad parking spots and sketchy rest stops. She warned me about Echo Park at night. Stick to well-lit areas, she said, stirring her iced coffee. Some folks around here don't play nice. Her words stuck with me, especially when I got back to Blue and found a folded note under my wiper. It just said, "Nice van." My skin crawled. It wasn't a compliment. It felt like a threat, subtle but disturbing. By evening, I was jumpy, double-checking Blue's locks. The alley next to my spot was dark, the auto shop's windows like black mirrors. I saw a group of guys hanging out near a streetlight, maybe 3 of them, passing a bottle. They weren't loud, but their glances kept drifting toward Blue. One of them, a stocky guy with a neck tattoo, stared longer than the rest. It was unsettling, like he was sizing me up for something bad. I told myself they were just locals, but my gut said otherwise. I drew the curtains tight, trying to stay invisible. I tried to distract myself with a book, but every creak of Blue's frame made me flinch. I kept thinking about Eugene, where the worst thing was a raccoon raiding your trash. LA was different, raw, unpredictable, with a pulse that felt alive and dangerous. I thought about moving Blue, but I didn't know the city well, and gas was low. Plus, I'd already paid for a week at this spot through a parking app. Leaving now felt like admitting defeat, but staying felt like tempting fate. The next morning, I found another note under my wiper, this one in red ink. "You don't belong here." My heart sank. This wasn't random anymore. It was personal, like I'd stepped into someone's territory. I scanned the street, but it was empty, just the alley yawning like a trap. I thought about calling Tasha, but my phone was at 15%, and I didn't want to seem paranoid. Still, the note's words burned into me, scary in their simplicity. I stuffed it in my pocket, hands shaky, and started Blue's engine, hoping a drive would clear my head. I cruised around Echo Park, looking for a new spot, but everything was either packed or marked no parking. I ended up back at my original spot, cursing myself for not planning better. As I parked, I saw the stocky guy again, leaning against the auto shop, his neck tattoo glinting under the streetlight. He didn't move, just watched, his eyes locked on Blue. It was horror movie creepy, like he was waiting for something. I locked the doors, my pulse racing, and slid low in my seat, feeling like I'd just made a big mistake staying here. By nightfall, the air felt heavy, like a storm was brewing. I kept my flashlight close, its beam a small comfort. The group was back, closer now, their voices low and sharp. I couldn't make out words, but their laughter sent chills down my spine. It wasn't friendly, it was the kind of laugh that comes before something awful. I gripped my flashlight tighter, wishing I had more than a flimsy lock between me and whatever they were planning. Something was coming, and it felt like I was running out of time. I woke up with a start, my neck stiff from dozing in Blue's driver's seat. The notes, "Nice van, you don't belong here," were crumpled in my pocket, their words looping in my head. I checked the windows, half expecting the stocky guy's face pressed against the glass. The street was empty, but the quiet felt wrong, like it was hiding something. I started Blue's engine, the rumble steadying my nerves, and decided to find a new spot. Staying here was asking for trouble, and I wasn't about to star in my own horror story. But LA's parking rules were a nightmare. and my gas gauge was hovering near empty. I drove to a gas station on Glendale Boulevard, wincing as I swiped my card for half a tank. While I filled up, I noticed a guy loitering nearby, his hood up, eyes on me. He wasn't the stocky guy, but something about his stare felt familiar, like he knew me. I hurried back to Blue, my hands shaky, and pulled out. I texted Tasha, asking for a safe parking spot. She replied fast, "Try the lot near Elysian Park. It's chill." I wanted to trust her, but Javier's creepy vibe had me second-guessing everyone. I headed to Elysian Park, weaving through morning traffic. The lot was tucked behind some trees, quieter than Echo Park, but still close to the city's pulse. I parked Blue near a chain-link fence, hoping the shade would keep me low-key. But as I stepped out to stretch, I saw it. A fresh scratch on Blue's door, shallow but deliberate, like someone had trailed a knife along it. My stomach dropped. Had they followed me? The thought was disturbing, like I'd never shake these guys, no matter where I went. I scanned the lot, but it was just me and a stray dog sniffing the grass. I called Javier, hoping he might know something about the locals. His voice was smooth, too smooth, like he was reading a script. "Echo Park's rough, man. You gotta watch your back." He didn't offer anything else, just hung up after saying he was busy. I cursed under my breath, feeling like I'd been played. Had he tipped someone off about me? I pushed the thought away, but it lingered, scary in its possibility. I decided to stay put for now, but I rigged a string of cans across Blue's door as a makeshift alarm. Better safe than sorry. By afternoon, I was restless, pacing the lot. I met a guy named Rico, a skateboarder with a busted board, chilling near the fence. He seemed friendly, offering me a soda from his cooler. We talked about Vanlife, but when I mentioned the notes, his face changed, like I'd said something I shouldn't. "You gotta move, like, now," he said, eyes darting. "Some crews around here don't mess around." His warning hit hard, echoing Tasha's. I'd been stubborn, thinking I could handle it, but maybe that was my first mistake. Back in Blue, I found another note tucked into the door handle. "Last chance." My heart slammed against my ribs. This wasn't a prank, it was a countdown. I checked the lot, but no one was around, just the trees swaying in the breeze. The note's red ink matched the last one, and the handwriting was the same, blocky, angry. I stuffed it in my glove box, my hands trembling. I thought about driving to a police station, but what would I say? Someone's leaving me creepy notes. They'd laugh me off, and I'd still be alone. I tried starting Blue again, but the engine sputtered, coughing like it was choking. My blood ran cold. I'd just filled the tank, so this wasn't about gas. I popped the hood, my hands clumsy with panic, and saw the battery cables loose, like someone had tampered with them. The lot was still empty, but I felt watched, like eyes were boring into me from the trees. This was horror movie bad, and I was the idiot who didn't leave town when I had the chance. I tightened the cables, praying it'd hold, but my gut screamed I was running out of time. As dusk settled, the lot felt darker, the trees casting jagged shadows. I locked myself in Blue, my flashlight flickering like it was on its last legs. I heard voices, low, muffled, coming from the fence. My pulse spiked. It was the stocky guy and his crew, I was sure of it. They weren't close yet, but their presence was like a noose tightening. I gripped my flashlight, wishing I'd bought a real weapon back in Eugene. Staying here was a mistake, but moving now felt just as dangerous. I peeked through the curtain, catching a glimpse of movement near the fence. 2 figures, maybe 3, their shapes blurred by the dark. One of them lit a cigarette, the glow briefly showing the stocky guy's neck tattoo. My breath caught. They weren't just passing through, they were here for me. The air felt thick, charged with something scary and inevitable. I slid low, my heart pounding, knowing I had to act fast or I'd be trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. The air in Blue was stifling, my breath fogging the window as I crouched low, watching the stocky guy's cigarette glow near the fence. My flashlight flickered, barely cutting through the dark, and the string of cans I'd rigged as an alarm rattled softly in the breeze. The voices outside grew sharper, like they were arguing, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it'd burst. This wasn't just a bad vibe anymore. It was a full-on horror show, and I was the main character nobody rooted for. The stocky guy stepped closer, his boots crunching gravel, and I knew something was wrong. Really wrong. I clutched my flashlight like a lifeline, its weak beam shaking in my hand. The notes, the scratch, the tampered battery, It all added up to something deliberate, something scary. I thought about a true crime podcast I'd listened to back in Eugene, about a woman stalked in a parking lot. She didn't make it. The memory made my stomach churn. I peeked out again, and the stocky guy was staring right at Blue, his tattooed neck glinting under the moonlight. He wasn't alone. Two others flanked him, one holding something long and metal, maybe a pipe. A sharp bang hit Blue's side, making me jump. The cans clattered, and I bit my lip to keep from screaming. "Hey, Van girl," the stocky guy called, his voice low and mocking. "We know you're in there." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a random shakedown. They knew I was alone, vulnerable. I scrambled to the driver's seat, praying the battery fix would hold. The key turned, and Blue roared to life. Thank God, but the noise was like a beacon. The stocky guy laughed, and I heard footsteps circling closer. I threw Blue into gear, my hands slick with sweat, but before I could peel out, something heavy slammed against the back door. The whole van rocked, and I yelped, my foot slipping off the gas. Another hit came, harder, like they were trying to cave in the metal. My mind flashed to that podcast again, how the woman's car wouldn't start, how she'd been trapped. This was my nightmare now, a disturbing reality unfolding in real time. I floored it, tires screeching, but the lot's gate was closed, chained shut. I was boxed in. I swerved toward the fence, hoping to ram through, but the pipe guy was already there, swinging his weapon at my windshield. The glass cracked, spiderwebbing across my view. I screamed, ducking as shards rained down. The stocky guy was at my window now, his face twisted in a grin that made my skin crawl. "Should have left, lady," he said, tapping the pipe against the glass. His buddies closed in, their shadows looming like monsters in a horror flick. I was trapped, my heart a drumbeat of panic. I fumbled for my flashlight, thinking I could blind them, but it flickered out. Useless. The stocky guy yanked at the door handle, the lock straining. I hit the horn, hoping the noise would scare them off or draw attention. It blared, loud and desperate, but the lot was too isolated. No one was coming. The pipe guy smashed the side window, glass exploding inward, and I shielded my face, feeling a sting as a shard cut my arm. Blood dripped, warm and sticky, and the terror hit me like a wave. This was real, and I might not make it. I grabbed my backpack, shoving my wallet and keys inside, and dove for the passenger door. The stocky guy was shouting now, his voice sharp with anger. "Get her!" he yelled, and I heard metal scrape as they pried at the back. I kicked the passenger door open, tumbling onto the gravel, my arm throbbing. The lot was dark, the trees swallowing what little light there was. I sprinted toward the fence, my lungs burning, knowing they were right behind me. Their footsteps were heavy, relentless, like a pack closing in on wounded prey. I reached the fence, my hands scrabbling at the chain link, but it was too high, too sharp. I turned, and the stocky guy was there, maybe 10 feet away, his pipe raised. His eyes were empty, like hurting me was just business. The other two fanned out, cutting off my escape. My mind raced, searching for a way out. But the lot felt like a cage, every shadow a threat. I thought of Tasha, Rico, even Javier. Had they known this was coming? The betrayal stung, but I had no time to dwell. I was in deep, and the terror was only getting worse. The stocky guy took a step closer, his grin widening. "No one's coming, Van girl," he said, his voice dripping with menace. I backed up, my heels hitting the fence, my arm bleeding onto the dirt. This wasn't just a scare, they wanted to hurt me, maybe worse. The pipe glinted, catching the moonlight, and I knew I had seconds to act. My heart screamed to run, to fight, but I was cornered, staring down a nightmare I couldn't wake from. My back pressed against the chain-link fence, the metal biting into my skin as the stocky guy stepped closer, his pipe glinting in the moonlight. My arm bled, dripping onto the gravel, and my breath came in sharp gasps. The other two guys flanked him, their faces shadowed but their intent clear. I was cornered, trapped in a horror show with no way out. I clutched my backpack, my only lifeline, and scanned for an escape. The lot was a dead end, but I spotted a gap in the fence, barely wide enough for me. I bolted, diving through the gap, my jacket tearing as I scraped past jagged metal. I hit the ground running, my sneakers pounding the dirt of an alley behind the lot. The stocky guy's shout echoed, "She's moving," and their footsteps thundered after me. My arm throbbed, blood soaking my sleeve, but adrenaline kept me going. The alley was a maze of dumpsters and broken crates, the kind of place you'd see in a scary movie right before someone doesn't make it. I dodged a trash can, nearly tripping, my heart screaming as their voices grew closer. This was life or death, and I was running on fumes. I turned a corner, praying for a busy street, but the alley spit me out into another empty lot, this one littered with rusted car parts and weeds. My lungs burned, my legs shaking as I sprinted toward a sagging wooden fence. Behind me, the pipe guy yelled, his voice raw with anger. Something whizzed past my head. A bottle, maybe, shattering against a concrete slab. I flinched but kept moving, my hands scrabbling at the fence. It wobbled under my weight, but I hauled myself over, landing hard in a parking lot on the other side. The lot was dimly lit, a few cars scattered around, but no people. I ducked behind a pickup truck, my chest heaving, trying to quiet my ragged breathing. The stocky guy's voice carried over the fence. "You can't run forever, lady." It was chilling, like he was enjoying the chase. I thought of Tasha's warning about LA's teeth. God, she wasn't kidding. My arm was slick with blood, and I tore off a strip of my shirt to tie it off, wincing as the fabric bit into the cut. I needed to move, but where? Every choice felt like a trap. Headlights swept the lot, and I froze, thinking it was them. But it was just a delivery van, idling near a warehouse. I crept toward it, staying low, hoping the driver could help. My mind raced. Could I trust anyone? Javier's cagey voice, Rico's weird reaction, Tasha's silence. They all felt like pieces of a disturbing puzzle. I reached the van, banging on the driver's window, but it was empty. The keys were gone, and so was my hope. Behind me, the fence rattled. They were climbing over. I sprinted toward the street beyond the lot, where neon signs flickered and cars zipped by. If I could reach the crowd, I might blend in, disappear. My legs screamed, my arm pulsing with pain, but I pushed on, weaving between parked cars. The stocky guy's laugh echoed, closer than I wanted. I glanced back. They were in the lot now, fanning out, their silhouettes sharp and menacing. This wasn't just a chase, it was a hunt, and I was running out of places to hide. I hit the street, merging into a crowd of late-night bar hoppers. Their laughter and chatter felt surreal, like I'd stumbled into another world. I pulled my hoodie up, trying to look normal, but my bloodied arm and torn shirt screamed trouble. A woman glanced at me, her eyes widening, but I kept moving, afraid to stop. The stocky guy's voice was fainter now, but I knew they weren't done. My backpack felt like a target on my back, and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. I needed a plan, fast. I spotted a gas station across the street, its fluorescent lights a beacon. I could call for help, maybe find a cop. I darted through traffic, horns blaring, and stumbled into the station's lot. My hands shook as I dug for change in my backpack, hoping the payphone worked. But as I reached the booth, I heard boots on pavement, slow, deliberate. My heart sank. The pipe guy was there, leaning against a pump, his weapon tapping his leg. He hadn't seen me yet, but he was close, too close. I ducked behind a rack of propane tanks, my pulse roaring. The gas station was busy, but no one noticed me, too caught up in their own lives. I thought about screaming, but what if it drew the stocky guy too? I was trapped in a nightmare, running from danger that seemed to know my every move. The pipe guy turned, his eyes scanning the lot, and I knew I had seconds before he spotted me. I had to act, or this horror would swallow me whole. I crouched behind the propane tanks, my breath shallow, watching the pipe guy's shadow stretch across the gas station lot. My arm burned, the makeshift bandage soaked with blood, and my legs felt like jelly. The crowd on the street was close, but they might as well have been a world away. I was alone, cornered in a horror story that kept getting worse. I thought about Eugene, the quiet nights by the Willamette River, and how I'd traded that for LA's chaos. Big mistake. The pipe guy moved closer, his boots scraping the pavement, and I knew I was running out of time. I fumbled in my backpack for anything useful, a pen, a water bottle, anything to fight back. My fingers closed around a pocket knife, a gift from my dad back in Oregon. It was small, but it was something. I flicked it open, the blade glinting faintly. The pipe guy was at the edge of the tanks now, his shadow looming. I held my breath, praying he'd pass, but he stopped, head tilting like he sensed me. His voice was low, almost a growl. "I see you, Van Girl." My stomach lurched. This was it, the scary moment I'd been dreading. I bolted, sprinting toward the gas station's convenience store, the knife trembling in my hand. The door was open, and I stumbled inside, the fluorescent lights blinding. The clerk, a bored guy in his 20s, barely looked up from his phone. "Help!" I gasped, my voice cracking. He frowned, confused, but before he could speak, the pipe guy burst in, his weapon raised. The clerk shouted, dropping his phone, and I dove behind a rack of chips, my heart pounding. The pipe guy's eyes locked on me, cold and empty, like I was nothing but a target. I scrambled toward the back, searching for an exit. The store was a maze of shelves and coolers, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee. I heard the stocky guy's voice outside, shouting to the pipe guy. They were working together, closing in. My mind flashed to a news story about a robbery gone wrong, how a bystander got caught in the crossfire. I wasn't going to be that person. I found a fire exit, shoving it open, and stumbled into an alley, the door slamming shut behind me. But I wasn't safe yet. The alley was dark, littered with trash and broken glass. I ran, my sneakers slipping on the slick pavement, my arms screaming with every step. The stocky guy's laugh echoed behind me, chilling and relentless. I turned a corner, hoping to lose them, but skidded to a stop. A chain-link gate blocked the way, padlocked tight. My heart sank. I spun around, and there they were, the stocky guy, the pipe guy, and the third one, all closing in. The stocky guy smirked, twirling his pipe like it was a toy. "Told you, last chance," he said. I gripped my knife, backing against the gate, its metal cold against my spine. My mind raced. Could I climb it? Fight? Scream? Every option felt useless. The pipe guy lunged, and I swung my knife wildly, catching his arm. He cursed, stumbling back, but the stocky guy was on me, his pipe swinging. I dodged, the metal grazing my shoulder, pain exploding down my arm. I screamed, dropping the knife, and kicked at his knee, desperate. He staggered, but the third guy grabbed my backpack, yanking me to the ground. I hit the pavement hard, my vision blurring. The stocky guy loomed over me, his face twisted with something darker than anger. Pleasure, maybe. It was disturbing, like he lived for this. I thought of Tasha, how she'd warned me, and my own stupidity for ignoring her. The pipe came down, and I rolled, the blow missing my head by inches. I scrambled up, my hands scraping the gravel, and lunged for the gate, clawing at the lock. It wouldn't budge. The stocky guy laughed, stepping closer, his pipe raised for the final swing. I screamed, my voice raw, hoping someone, anyone, would hear. But the alley was silent, the city indifferent. The pipe guy was back, blood dripping from his arm, his eyes burning with rage. I thought of my dad, my friends in Eugene, all the plans I'd made. They felt so far away now, swallowed by this nightmare. The stocky guy swung again, and I ducked, but the third guy grabbed my hair, yanking me back. Pain seared my scalp, and I knew I'd made my fatal mistake, running into this alley, thinking I could outrun them. The pipe came down, a flash of metal and pain, and the world went black. The last thing I heard was the stocky guy's laugh, cold and final, echoing in the dark. LA had chewed me up, and I'd walked right into its jaws. There was no hero, no escape, just me, the pavement, and a tragedy I couldn't outrun. I'm Gideon Voss, 27 years old, from Missoula, Montana. My van, a rusty Dodge Ram I call Scout, is my home on wheels, my way of dodging the monotony of a desk job. I've been crisscrossing the country for 18 months, chasing open roads and cheap gas. Last week, I rolled into Los Angeles, lured by its sprawl and stories. I found a parking spot in a quiet corner of Koreatown, near a shuttered laundromat and a noodle shop with flickering neon. The spot felt tucked away, perfect for laying low, but the air had a bite, like the city was sizing me up. I brushed it off. Big cities always feel a little off at first. Scout's my haven, a fold-out bed, a mini fridge, and a guitar I'm too shy to play. That first night, I cooked beans on my stove, the smell mixing with the city's smog. The street was calm, just the hum of traffic and a few late-night dog walkers. I liked the vibe, but as I ate, a flicker outside caught my eye, someone moving fast past the laundromat. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth, but the street was empty again. My pulse ticked up. Just a local, I told myself, but my hands locked the doors anyway. The next morning, I hit up a coffee shop on Western Avenue, needing Wi-Fi to plan my next move. A barista named Hannah, maybe 30, with a nose ring and a quick smile, chatted me up about Vanlife. She seemed cool, but asked too many questions about where I was parked. I kept it vague, saying I was near the freeway. Her smile faltered, like she knew something I didn't. Back at Scout, I found a new scuff on the rear door, like someone had kicked it. My gut twisted. Was it random, or was someone messing with me? I met another Vanlifer, a guy named Corey, at a taco truck nearby. He was in his 40s, with a weathered Sprinter and stories about dodging cops in San Diego. He warned me about Koreatown. Some folks here don't like outsiders, he said, wiping salsa off his chin. Watch your stuff. His words stuck, especially when I got back to Scout and saw a crumpled flyer under my wiper. It read, "Move along." My skin prickled. It wasn't an ad. It felt personal, like a warning straight out of a horror movie. By dusk, I was on edge, checking Scout's locks every hour. The laundromat's windows reflected the streetlights, turning them into eerie eyes. I noticed a couple of guys hanging out across the street, near a pawn shop, their hoods up. They weren't loud, just smoking and staring, but one of them, a skinny guy with a scar on his cheek, kept eyeing Scout. It was unsettling, like he was memorizing my van. I told myself they were just bored, but my gut screamed otherwise. I tried to chill with my guitar, plucking a few chords, but every creak of Scout's frame made me jump. I kept thinking about Missoula, where the worst thing was a neighbor's lawnmower at dawn. LA was different, gritty, alive, and a little scary. I thought about moving, but Koreatown streets were packed, and I didn't know where else to go. Plus, I'd spent my last $20 on gas. Leaving now meant dipping into my emergency cash, and I wasn't ready for that. The next day, I found another flyer under my wiper, this one in Sharpie, "You're not welcome." My heart sank. This wasn't a coincidence. It was targeted, deliberate. I scanned the street, but it was just kids on bikes and a delivery guy. I stuffed the flyer in my glove box, my hands shaky, and called Corey. He didn't pick up. I texted Hannah, asking if she knew about any trouble in the area. No reply. The silence felt heavy, like I was being watched, judged. I drove around Koreatown, looking for a safer spot, but every lot was either gated or full. I ended up back near the laundromat, cursing my bad luck. As I parked, I saw the skinny guy again, leaning against the pawn shop, his scar catching the light. He didn't move, just stared, his eyes boring into Scout. It was creepy, like he was waiting for me to slip up. I locked the doors, my pulse racing, and sank low, feeling like I'd just painted a target on my back. By nightfall, the street felt different, darker, tighter, like it was closing in. The guys were back, 3 of them now, their voices low and sharp. I couldn't hear words, but their laughter sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't friendly, it was the kind of laugh that comes before something bad. I kept my flashlight close, its beam a small comfort, and rigged a rope across the door as a tripwire. Something was brewing, and I was starting to think I'd parked in the wrong part of town. I woke up sweaty, my neck cramped from sleeping half upright in Scout's driver's seat. The flyers, "Move along, you're not welcome," were stuffed in the glove box, their words gnawing at me. I checked the windows, expecting the skinny guy's scarred face staring back. The street was empty, just the hum of early Koreatown traffic, but it felt like a mask for something darker. I needed to move, find a new spot, but LA's parking was a puzzle I couldn't crack. I started Scout, the engine coughing like it was mad at me, and decided to scout a safer place before things got worse. I pulled into a gas station on Olympic Boulevard, wincing as I burned through my emergency cash for a quarter tank. A woman at the pump next to me, maybe 50, with a tired face, noticed Scout. "Nice rig," she said, but her eyes lingered too long, like she was taking notes. I mumbled thanks and sped off, my nerves frayed. I texted Corey, asking for a safe parking tip. He replied, "Try the lot by MacArthur Park. Less heat there." His words fell off, like he was holding something back, but I had no better leads. I drove to MacArthur Park, weaving through honking cars and street vendors. The lot was open, bordered by scraggly trees and a chain-link fence. It felt less exposed than Koreatown, but not by much. I parked Scout near a lamppost, hoping the light would keep trouble away. But as I stepped out to check the tires, I saw it, a fresh gouge on Scout's side, like someone had dragged a screwdriver across it. My stomach sank. Had they followed me? The thought was disturbing, like I was a marked man no matter where I went. I called Hannah, hoping she'd know something about the Koreatown crew. Her voice was clipped, like she was distracted. Yeah, some guys there don't like fans. Move on quick. She hung up before I could ask more. Her tone bugged me. Had she tipped someone off? I shook it off, but doubt crept in, scary in its weight. I rigged a new tripwire with some twine and cans, a trick I'd learned from camping in Montana. If anyone messed with Scout, I'd hear it. But it felt like putting a band-aid on a broken leg. By noon, I was restless, pacing the lot. A kid on a skateboard, maybe 16, rolled up, eyeing Scout. "You staying long?" he asked, his tone too curious. I shrugged, keeping it vague, but his smirk felt wrong, like he knew something. "Careful, man," he said, skating off. His warning echoed Corey's, and I cursed myself for not leaving LA altogether. I'd thought I could handle the city, but maybe that was my first mistake. The gouge on Scout's side stared back, a reminder I wasn't welcome. Back in Scout, I found another flyer under the wiper, this one scrawled in black ink, "Last warning." My heart thudded. This wasn't random, it was a campaign, like I'd pissed off the wrong people. I checked the lot, but it was just me, the trees, and a stray cat. The flyer's words felt like a punch, scary and final. I thought about calling the cops, but what could I say? Some guys are leaving me notes. They'd brush me off, and I'd still be stuck, alone in a city that felt like a trap. I tried starting Scout to move again, but the engine sputtered, then died. My blood ran cold. I popped the hood, my hands shaking, and saw the fuel line loose, like someone had messed with it. The lot was empty, but I felt eyes on me, hidden in the shadows. This was horror movie territory, and I'd ignored every red flag. I tightened the line, praying it'd hold, but my gut said I was on borrowed time. I needed to get out, but the city felt like it was closing in. As night fell, the lot turned eerie, the lampost's light flickering like it was giving up. I locked myself in Scout, my flashlight dim but ready. Voices drifted from the trees, low, sharp, like a whispered plan. My pulse spiked. It was the skinny guy and his crew, I knew it. They weren't close yet, but their presence was suffocating, like a storm about to break. I gripped my flashlight, wishing I'd kept my dad's old hunting knife instead of selling it. Staying here was dumb, but leaving now felt just as risky. I peeked through the curtain, catching a glimpse of movement near the fence. 3 figures, their shapes blurred in the dark. One lit a cigarette, the glow catching the skinny guy's scar. My breath hitched. They weren't just hanging out, they were watching, waiting. The air felt thick, charged with something disturbing, like I'd stepped into their game and didn't know the rules. I sank low, heart hammering, knowing I had to move fast or I'd be caught in something I couldn't escape. The darkness in Scout was suffocating, my flashlight barely cutting through the gloom as I crouched low, watching the skinny guy's cigarette glow near the fence. The twine and can alarm rattled faintly, making my heart lurch. The voices outside sharpened, like they were plotting, and my pulse pounded so loud I swore they could hear it. This wasn't just a bad night, it was a horror show, and I was the guy who didn't see it coming. The skinny guy stepped closer, his scar catching the lamplight, and I knew something was seriously wrong. They weren't here to talk. I gripped my flashlight, its dim beam shaking in my hand. The flyers, the gouge, the tampered fuel line. It all screamed setup, something scary and deliberate. I thought back to a news story from Missoula about a guy jumped in a lot, left bleeding over a petty grudge. Was that me now? My stomach twisted. I peeked out again, and the skinny guy was staring right at Scout, his eyes glinting like a predator's. 2 others were with him, one holding something heavy, a tire iron, maybe. A loud bang hit Scout's side, the cans clattering as I jumped. "Yo, Ven dude," the skinny guy called, his voice sharp and mocking. "Time's up." My blood froze. They knew I was in here, alone, easy pickings. I scrambled to the driver's seat, praying the fuel line fix would hold. The key turned, and Scout sputtered to life. Thank God, but the noise was a dead giveaway. The skinny guy laughed, and I heard boots crunching closer, circling like sharks. I floored it, aiming for the lot's exit, but the gate was locked, a chain glinting in the dark. My heart sank. I was trapped. The tire iron guy swung at my taillight, the crunch of glass making me flinch. I swerved, tires screeching, and headed for the fence, hoping to smash through. The skinny guy was at my window now, his face twisted in a grin that made my skin crawl. "Should have listened," he said, tapping the iron against the glass. This was horror unfolding, and I was stuck in the middle. I yanked the wheel, aiming for a weak spot in the fence, but the tire iron guy was faster, slamming his weapon into my side mirror. It shattered, bits flying into Scout. I yelped, ducking as glass rained down. My mind flashed to that Missoula story, how the guy never saw it coming. I wasn't going to be him. I hit the horn, the blare splitting the night, hoping someone would hear. But the lot was too far from the street, and no one was coming. The skinny guy's laugh cut through, chilling and cruel. I slammed the gas, Scout lurching toward the fence. The impact shook my bones, but the chain link held, bending just enough to taunt me. The third guy was at the back now, prying at the door with something sharp. My hands shook as I grabbed my backpack, shoving my wallet and keys inside. I needed to run, but the lot was a cage, every corner a trap. The skinny guy banged on the window, the glass cracking under his tire iron. This wasn't just a scare, they wanted me, and it was terrifyingly clear. I dove for the passenger door, my flashlight slipping to the floor. The lock stuck, and I cursed, my fingers fumbling. Another bang rocked Scout, the back door groaning under pressure. "Get out here," the tire iron guy yelled, his voice raw with excitement. I kicked the passenger door open, tumbling onto the gravel, my knees scraping raw. The lot was dark, the trees swallowing the light, but I ran, aiming for a gap in the fence, their footsteps pounding behind me. I squeezed through the gap, my shirt snagging, and stumbled into an alley. My lungs burned, my heart racing as I sprinted, dodging trash cans and broken bottles. The skinny guy's voice echoed, "He's out," and their boots thundered closer. I thought of Corey's warning, Hannah's silence. Had they set me up? The betrayal stung, but I had no time to think. The alley was a maze, and I was running blind, the horror of their chase closing in like a noose. The skinny guy was right behind me, his tire iron scraping the wall as he ran. "No point running, man," he shouted, his voice dripping with menace. I turned a corner, praying for a way out, but the alley narrowed, walls closing in. My flashlight was gone, my backpack heavy, and their steps were relentless. I was deep in a nightmare, and the terror was only getting worse. My sneakers skidded on the alley's slick pavement, my breath ragged as I ran from the skinny guy and his crew. The tire iron scrape echoed behind me, a chilling reminder they were close. My backpack bounced, slowing me down, but I couldn't ditch it. My keys, wallet, everything was inside. The alley was a maze of dumpsters and shadows, like a scene from a horror movie where the guy never makes it. I turned a corner, hoping for a street, but hit a chain-link fence, rusted and tall. My heart sank. Their footsteps pounded closer, the skinny guy's laugh cutting through the dark like a blade. I scrambled up the fence, my hands slipping on the metal, my knees stinging from the gravel. A bottle smashed below me, glass spraying as the tire iron guy shouted, "He's climbing." I hauled myself over, dropping hard into a vacant lot littered with tires and weeds. My ankle twisted, pain shooting up my leg, but I kept moving, limping toward a cluster of parked cars. The skinny guy's voice rang out, "You're done, Van Dude." It was scary, like they were enjoying the chase, hunting me for sport. I ducked behind a rusted sedan, my chest heaving, trying to quiet my gasps. The lot was dark, the city's glow barely reaching it. I could hear them climbing the fence, their boots clanging against the metal. My mind raced. Could I hide here? Run again? Every option felt like a trap. I thought of Corey's warning about Koreatown, how I'd ignored it, thinking I could handle LA. Big mistake. The tire iron guy landed in the lot, his silhouette sharp against the fence, and I knew I had seconds to move. I sprinted toward a gap between buildings, my ankles screaming with every step. The alley beyond was narrow, smelling of piss and garbage, but it led to a busy street, my only shot. Their footsteps echoed, relentless, the skinny guy's laugh closer now. I stumbled over a crate, nearly falling, my hands scraping the brick wall. A memory hit me, a news story about a runner attacked in an alley, left for dead over nothing. I wasn't going to be that guy. I pushed harder, the street's lights flickering ahead like a lifeline. The alley opened to a crowded sidewalk, neon signs buzzing, people laughing like nothing was wrong. I pulled my hoodie up, blending into the chaos, my heart still pounding. My ankle throbbed, and sweat stung my eyes, but I kept moving, weaving through bar hoppers and street vendors. The skinny guy's crew was still out there. I could feel it, like a shadow on my back. I glanced over my shoulder, catching a glimpse of the tire iron guy scanning the crowd. This wasn't over. It was a horror show, and I was still running for my life. I ducked into a 24-hour diner, its fluorescent lights harsh but safe. I slid into a booth, my hands shaking as I ordered water. The waitress, an older woman with a smoker's cough, raised an eyebrow at my sweaty face. "You okay, kid?" she asked. I nodded, too wired to talk, my eyes glued to the window. The street looked normal, but I knew better. Those guys were hunters, and I was prey. I thought about calling Hannah or Corey, but my phone was nearly dead, and their silence felt like a betrayal. I spotted a payphone by the diner's entrance, a rare relic. I dug for change, my fingers clumsy, and limped over, keeping low. I dialed 911, but the line crackled, then died. My stomach dropped. Was it the phone, or had they cut me off somehow? The thought was disturbing, like they were always one step ahead. I glanced outside, and the tire iron guy was there, across the street, his eyes scanning the diner. My pulse spiked. I had to move, but my ankle was swelling, slowing me down. I slipped out the diner's side door, sticking to the shadows of an alley behind it. The street's noise faded, replaced by the hum of my own fear. I leaned against a wall, catching my breath, my ankle pulsing. The skinny guy's laugh echoed faintly, like he was circling closer. I needed a plan, find a cop, a cab, anything, but every step felt like a gamble. The city was a maze, and I was running out of places to hide, trapped in a nightmare that wouldn't let go. I crept toward a busier street, hoping to blend in again, but my limp made me stand out. A group of college kids passed, laughing, oblivious to the danger trailing me. I wanted to scream for help, but what if the crew was watching? My ankle gave out, and I stumbled, catching myself on a lamppost. The skinny guy's voice cut through the dark. "We see you, man." My blood ran cold. They were close, too close, and I was running out of time. I clung to the lamppost, my ankle screaming, the skinny guy's voice still ringing in my ears. The street was alive with LA's pulse, cars honking, neon buzzing, but it felt like a cruel joke, all that life ignoring my terror. My phone was dead, my backpack heavy, and blood trickled from a cut on my hand, scraped raw in the alley. The skinny guy and his crew were out there, hunting me, and I was limping like wounded prey. This was horror at its worst, a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I scanned the crowd, praying for a cop, but saw only strangers. I hobbled toward a gas station, its lights a faint hope. My ankle throbbed, slowing me to a shuffle, but I pushed on, the skinny guy's laugh echoing in my head. I thought of Missoula, my dad's old cabin, how safe it felt compared to this. I'd come to LA for adventure, but all I'd found was danger. At the gas station, I ducked behind a pump, catching my breath. A clerk inside was stocking shelves, oblivious. I wanted to bang on the glass, beg for help, but the tire iron guy's silhouette appeared across the street, scanning. I crept toward the station's payphone, my hands shaking as I fumbled for coins. The skinny guy's voice cut through the night. "Where you at, Van Dude?" My heart froze. He was close, maybe in the next alley. I dialed 911 again, but the line was dead, just like before. Panic clawed at me. Was this planned? The thought was scary, like they'd rigged everything against me. I dropped the phone, my eyes darting. The tire iron guy was moving closer, his weapon glinting under the station's lights. I had to run, but my ankle was a traitor. I limped toward an alley behind the station, hoping to lose them in the dark. The pavement was slick, littered with trash, and my foot slipped, pain shooting through my leg. I bit back a yelp, leaning against a dumpster. The skinny guy's laugh was louder now, joined by the others, their footsteps deliberate. I thought of Hannah, Corey. Had they sold me out? The betrayal stung, but I had no time to dwell. I spotted a fire escape on a building nearby, its ladder just out of reach. If I could climb it, I might get away. I lunged for the ladder, my hands scraping rust as I pulled myself up. My ankle screamed, but I climbed, each rung a fight. The skinny guy burst into the alley, his scar catching the moonlight. "Up there," he shouted, and the tire iron guy swung at the ladder, the clang echoing. I kept climbing, my arms shaking, until I reached a rooftop. It was flat, littered with vents and debris, but open, exposed. I crawled behind an air unit, my breath ragged, knowing they'd follow. This was a horror show, and I was trapped again. The ladder rattled. They were climbing. My heart pounded as I searched for a weapon, finding a broken pipe in the debris. It wasn't much, but it was heavy, solid. The skinny guy's head appeared over the roof's edge, his grin cold and cruel. "No more running," he said, pulling himself up. The tire iron guy was right behind, his weapon raised. I gripped the pipe, my hands slick with sweat, and swung as the skinny guy lunged. The pipe connected, a sickening thud, and he stumbled, cursing, but the tire iron guy was on me, his swing catching my shoulder. Pain exploded, my arm going numb as I fell, the pipe clattering away. I scrambled back, my ankle giving out, the rooftop's edge dangerously close. The skinny guy recovered, blood trickling from his temple, his eyes burning with rage. "Big mistake," he growled, advancing with the third guy, who held a knife. I thought of my mom, my friends, the life I'd left in Missoula. I'd wanted freedom, but I'd found a nightmare. The tire iron guy raised his weapon, and I knew I'd screwed up, coming to LA, parking in Koreatown, thinking I could handle this. I rolled, dodging the tire iron's swing, but the knife guy grabbed my jacket, yanking me down. My head hit the roof, stars bursting in my vision. The skinny guy loomed, his tire iron raised, his laugh cold and final. "Told you, man," he said, and the world blurred. I wanted to fight, to scream, but my body was done. The last thing I saw was the tire iron coming down, the city's lights fading behind it. LA had chewed me up, and I'd walked right into its trap. There was no way out, no last second save. Just me, the rooftop, and a tragedy I couldn't escape. The skinny guy's laugh was the last sound I heard, a cruel echo in the dark.